I'll call the meeting to order, or the work session. I don't know how formal we are during work session. So. We do roll call during the work session, just to, I usually just have, are we doing minutes again?
No. Usually we just have everybody announce themselves for the record.
Okay.
Commissioner Hunter,
Like how? Suzanne Watson,
Commissioner Smith,
thank you. Does anybody know if Pete's gonna be here or not?
You said it wouldn't be.
He wouldn't be? Okay. Okay, great. So, the agenda tonight is just, a work session on the draft element of the, housing element. And, I was thinking, we could just use a presentation on this. Similar to the presentations we've made on other elements, but this one's kind of big and significant. The first thing I thought would be helpful is if we could have, I don't know if this is conclusive, but state statute 3123-206, G and J are specific to the housing element. Colorado state statute, and I was gonna try to bring it up on this really fast, but I don't know if there's any bringing it up really fast. Is that something you could provide us with, Samira? So we can maybe look at it when we're looking at the housing element and kind of review it to see if we're covering the needed points in that statute.
I need the site again. The site.
3123-206, paragraph G and J. Kind of similar to what we did with the zoning elements. There were specific requirements there. So do we go to LexisNexis, or is that just,
this stuff is actually screen sharing right now, so he's looking for it.
okay. Oh, hello.
You made it.
So, I opened the meeting, we all announced our names. If you'd like to announce your name, Pete, for this work session, it's a little less formal.
Thank you. Peter McCarthy.
Okay, and I've asked for Colorado statute 3123-206, G and J, or what I've seen referred to specific to the housing element. So we're trying to bring that up. So we have that in mind when we're going over this portion of the plan. Do you know how to get by the password thing? Even if I just put a few like numbers in or something. I mean, I could do QWERTY, but it doesn't like that.
As far as which,
It has an enter password on it.
oh yeah, that's just, I put a temporary in
Oh,
here.
I see, that's
Yeah,
what it
and
is.
so
Okay.
you can change that.
Well, I did essentially the same, just one row down, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you.
And it might be hooked up to the office next door, so you might want
Oh,
to tell it.
yeah,
Do you know where to tell it to go?
yeah, let's see. It probably has it here. TOPS.
And it'll remember, it should.
Okay. Yeah, it's connected, thank you. Do you go to LexisNexis or do you just type 3123?
I usually just type in whatever browser I'm using. CRS,
04. Okay,
and then something comes up.
okay.
Might take you a lesson, LexisNexis, but usually something
Okay.
simpler.
And, yeah, the most current one,
I have 206J is in that table of comments,
206J.
and it says plan needs an element devoted to housing, which include projections of population growth and housing needs to accommodate the growth.
And there's G as well.
Right, I don't have G. G is
Okay.
not in the comment table, but J is.
Oh, what's the comment table that you're looking at?
The comment table that Stefan put together and then I,
Oh,
added in
Okay.
changes.
I was just looking at
Or
some
the-
of his emails and that he said the housing element didn't, from the housing plan, didn't address those parts of the statute, and that's why we had to rewrite things. And I just want to make sure that we're addressing the appropriate portions of
Yeah.
the statute.
And I'm just saying that table had all the comments and then I had updated it for after the meeting you all had in
Okay.
August with all the proposed changes and agreed upon changes. So, and that was in the last agenda packet, just if anybody needs to look at it when we had our November 4th meeting, but I
Okay.
only inserted
Right here.
J.
This is 2023 Title 39, ledge.colorado.gov.
Could change.
I have an older copy. I probably had a Xerox copy of the whole thing about the comp plan, and it might have been in there, but I don't think it was the 2023 version, so. 204. Right here. G and J. So page 235, 258 of the 2023 revised statutes on ledge.colorado.gov is where I'm at.
I'm not looking for it.
Okay.
I'll trust you.
Okay. Probably doesn't look very. It's 250. It's the answer.
You're welcome.
You went to the book, huh?
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not easy to get online.
Yeah, no, it's not.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So it's on the back side. So G. Is in the middle there, and J is right under it. Okay. And it refers, number one is what else?
G is the map.
Well, it's other things. Is that the map?
Sufficient land, well, the general character, location, extent of community centers, housing developments, whether public or private, the existing proposed or projected location of existing residential neighborhoods, sufficient land for future housing development for existing and projected economic and other needs. So I think that was one of the maps that was needed, but I could be wrong. Does that sound right, Stefan?
It does.
There were 4 maps that needed to be created.
And then the regional plan agreement, that can be incorporated by reference. And so is that the 2010 one?
That would be that intergovernmental agreement between the town and county.
Okay, and we can refer to that, we've seen that. But it doesn't really say very much about housing, does it?
Future housing lands, sufficient land for future housing development for existing and projected economic and other
Okay.
needs.
And that's been covered with the FLUM, the future land use map and the future land use element.
And the projections of population growth and housing needs to accommodate the projected population for specified increments of time. The municipality may base these projections upon data from the Department of Local Affairs and upon the municipality's local objectives. So how is that? Well, so anyway, I just wanted this in front of us. So are these the only two elements that deal with housing in in the state statute? Is, I saw reference to that, but I'm not sure if that's conclusive. But, G, yep. And I mean, there's the zoning kind of, but it's a little different. We address that.
It's definitions.
Yeah. Okay. Okay,
And
great.
right now, there's a placeholder called figure 4 under future land use plan for the public places and facilities map, which I think is this is maybe not. Because there's 4 maps that are needed.
It's funny, it doesn't specify
Roads and
that. I mean,
bridges.
obviously, that's the easiest way to maybe express this. So I don't know if the written element should refer to the map at all or what, or, anyway. Okay, I wanted to start with that as a kind of a starting point for the housing portion of the plan. And the, other question I had just right off the top was, someone was telling me there's some discussion on Facebook. The town has been making some comments about the master plan. Is that true? And if so, of course, now with the computer, I suppose I can look, but I'm wondering if we can all be on the same page with that, if there have been comments made, so we know what's going on with explanations. But I don't know, I haven't seen it for myself. I just heard someone telling me something about Facebook. I don't know how many Facebook people are there.
Stefan, you might be able to.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull one up right now.
Yeah.
ADU,
Oh, was it ADUs?
that meeting, your last, I
Okay.
thought it
I
would
don't.
put something on it about the last meeting on.
So it wasn't
Yeah,
about the
that
comprehensive
short-term
plan?
rentals.
No,
For people.
no, there was a post made today.
Oh, okay. Oh. Well, I can't read that. My eyes aren't good enough to see that. Okay. Was it on Town of Peonia? Facebook, Town of Peonia. I spelled that wrong. Got a place in Hawaii. P-I-A. Okay. Is it under news or, well, here we go. Here's so it's on the Town of Peonia Facebook site? Okay.
That's correct.
Get rid of that. Oh, so, the housing element is up for discussion during this evening's planning commission meeting. That's what you've written? We hope to hear from you and your thoughts on this draft element. Can you read that? You can read the element here. There's a link to the town's site with the element. So it starts with a printed introduction to the element, it looks like. And that's it. What's that?
Read further down, the last 2 paragraphs of what
Oh.
it's addressing.
Oh, despite a misleading post on the message boards, policy housing 14 states, the town shall discourage redevelopment and demolition practices. And so we're talking there, it's discussing some of the elements in the thing. The displacement of very low and moderate income residents, the special needs households. This means that the town will discourage someone from buying two homes next to each other, demolish them, and then build a very large mansion type house. These policies are meant to protect our small rural town. And that looks like that's it, right? Okay, so there's a post that was made. Okay. Okay, so we have this plan. I guess everybody's had a chance to look it over, and I'm just kind of wondering if we could maybe have a little bit of explanation of the thought process that went into it. I wasn't sure, I mean, before we start commenting about it and how it kind of ties back to the statute. Because apparently the housing needs assessment and action plan didn't address the statute, and that's why we needed this housing element in the comprehensive plan. So.
I'm not sure I agree with that statement necessarily, because the point, the housing needs assessment action plan is a much larger document with lots and lots of statistics and things, whereas the comprehensive plan is a place that anyone wanting to do some kind of development would go to look and see succinctly what the goals and policies are that the town's following, which are based on the housing needs assessment. But if you've read the housing needs assessment action plan, there's a lot in there that is not that helpful for seeing what the town's overarching planning goals are.
Okay, I was just looking at this email back and forth, and I saw an explanation that we needed this housing element because it didn't address the elements in CRS 3123 T06 G and J, which are specific to comprehensive plans, and the housing needs assessment and the action plan in its existing state doesn't meet the requirements of CRS 3123 T06 G and J. And that was from Stefan. So I guess I just want to know.
A map, is the map.
Well, yeah, but that's, okay, I guess I'm just kind of confused because I thought it referred to, anyway, okay. So, let's start.
Probably the one thing that I would say is not in the housing element is what's required of J, which is a population estimate. Projections of population growth and housing needs, which probably is in the housing needs assessment. And I think that a statement from there could be extracted into the intro of the housing needs assessment, just my rereading it.
Okay. Any more comments or questions or any more presentation about this? The thought process that went behind it?
Can I just add one more thing? Right now, the comprehensive plan is not referencing that. I don't think it is. I could be wrong, but the housing assessment action plan should be a document that is referenced by this so that people know to go look at it.
At one point it was somewhere, it's not in this, but it was in the
It might have been,
comprehensive plan somewhere.
yeah, I'm not sure it's actually listed at the end or I think it's mentioned in the beginning. It's where the reference is used. I think it's there. But I think it probably
Yeah.
needs to be brought down into the appendix, which lists specifically the documents used and maybe on links. You know, if this is all electronic, there'd be links to all those. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case.
What's that?
It's listed as a document used for referencing for the creation of the comprehensive plan,
Which document?
the housing needs assessment and action plan.
Correct. So those are two separate documents. The housing needs assessment and the housing action.
But my point is, I think they're referenced in the beginning as some of the major references, but we did put them in the appendix. And I think once this is approved, it'd be nice to have electronic links to a lot of those documents. So I think that might be just one of the pieces that's missing.
So,
On page 68, refers to the housing needs assessment on page 30.
30 of the agenda package.
No, just, yes, in this agenda packet.
Oh, what was on page 30? I'm sorry.
What was that again, Lynn? Did you mention what 30 and 68?
On page 68.
Yeah, 68 of the packet talks about.
Yeah.
The housing and neighborhoods element is informed by both the 2023 housing needs assessment and the 2023 housing.
And I was referring to a list that's in kind of the beginning of the introduction, which gives the main documents. Anyway, it's in there, it just needs to be attached, in my opinion.
Okay, so my question then is that housing needs assessment and action plan is kind of a massive document. So how does this housing portion adequately and equally cover all the points and kind of crystallize things is what I want to know, to make it easier maybe to grasp and understand. You know, I guess I want to know what points in the action plan. I mean, was the action plan for us or is the action plan for the Board of Trustees? And how does our comprehensive plan kind of address those elements and maybe make it a little bit more, I guess it's kind of what's the framework in there that we're kind of pointing this to? I mean, springboarding from. So I guess I want to know what are the elements that were being looked at. So I know that we are saying that was informed, but I want to know how was it informed? I mean, what specifically? I mean, that's a pretty broad statement because it's a big document. It's another binder I didn't bring. I mean, it's a big document. So that's my question. I was having a hard time. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And I was hoping this would be a little bit more, maybe a synopsis of it in some way to kind of get my mind around it.
I kind of think the introduction is a synopsis.
The
personally.
introduction is new documents that we're talking about, and I'm uncomfortable with those.
I think those are just references, not the documents weren't used, just how neighborhoods are created and the
Okay.
benefits of neighborhoods. and-
Okay, well, so I didn't really want to work on this. I wanted to hear that, the thoughts behind it, because I look at this and I could take half of these words out. I'm not comfortable with them. I think there's too much here. And until someone can explain to me why it's here, maybe it can inform my, understanding of this a little bit better. This Congress for the New Urbanism, it doesn't fit in Paonia. It shouldn't be, this is too much for us. Principles of good neighborhood design. That's why everybody's moved here. Paonia is a great place as is. And when I look at this, I think of the synthetic neighborhoods and developments that I saw in Edwards this summer. You know, the Riverwalk, the Village. I feel really uncomfortable with that. It's a synthetic, trying to kind of infuse that small town feeling again into these places that have lost it. But I see this is why Paonia is such an awesome place, is because we have this. And I don't think we need to inject this kind of synthetic stuff that I think really appeals to developers. Anyway, so I didn't want to make this a session where I started bringing up my concerns, because I wanted to hear, more about the thought processes that went into it. This is one of the bigger parts of the plan. And there's just, I don't know, when we did the zoning plan, we really talked about what we put in, why we were trying to put things into it. We cut some stuff out because it didn't refer to what was in the statute. And we actually,
Repeatable.
repeating. So I see things that are conflicting in here, and I see things that are kind of repetitive in here. Like that whole thing about, what Facebook was saying something about not demolishing things, but then I see things about demolition in here. So it seems like there's like conflicting points in it, and I don't know what and so what I've seen happen in this town is when you don't have clear directions and then you can see it this way or you can see it this way, it's too open to, you can always find the answer to support what you currently want to do. So there's kind of no point in having it because it's too conflicting. But anyway, yes, Peter.
Are you able to buy 2 lots and demolish the houses and build a mega mansion on, or a McMansion on it based on our current zoning?
Probably could.
You could.
I mean, that's property rights, right? I mean,
Okay, what I'm asking is that a policy that is a change? from
no, I
what
don't
we
think there's
currently
any
have?
policy that we've ever had that. I don't see where there's a policy in here that states you can't do that either. That was kind of interesting to read.
Has anyone ever done that?
I don't know. I'm on 4 lots. I have a neighbor on 6 lots and a neighbor on 5 lots. I know you can subdivide them, but I suppose you could also, I mean, there's a new house that went on up there on First, and I don't know how many lots they were on. But up on First and Doris, but
That's just one.
that's in one lot, one big lot. Okay.
And I own two properties right next door to each other. And
Well-
I don't know if I could demolish all the buildings on both properties
You
and ask to turn it into 6 lots. I don't know if I can, because I have 2 properties, each have 3 lots. And- I'm asking if the code allows me to turn it into a 6 lot property.
But that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about taking 2 separate lots, demolishing the houses and building one house.
Which is what I could do.
You could-
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I'm asking. I conceivably, I literally own 2 properties right next to each other. And each have 3, there are 3 lots on each one. And that's what I'm asking, is if, since I own them both, could I come in and say, I want to build a house with the proper setbacks and everything else, but I want it to be 5,000 square feet across the property line? I don't know if that's possible. But I do have 3 lots that I could easily put a much, much bigger house on than what's there now. So, and as long as I met the setbacks, I guess I would be okay in the R1. So,
Well, I know, well, anyway, I can think of an example, it's not quite the same, but anyway, I don't see where this addresses that. I mean, this doesn't say, what policy in here actually addresses that topic?
We're going all over the place.
I know, so
So,
I was just
Can
thinking.
can I address a couple of things first?
Yeah.
So first, we have an existing comprehensive plan, and our comprehensive plan is from 1996. This comprehensive plan is woefully lacking. Should have been updated 20 years ago. It wasn't. And so I think that's why we're here, right? We've got a comprehensive plan that really should have been addressed 20 years ago. We've tried 3 times since this comprehensive plan draft to get a new comprehensive plan in place and have failed. We're at the finish line. We're trying to talk about some things, to add elements, to talk about editing elements before we're ready to present a final draft that we're going to ask Phoenix Rising Resources to do that public outreach for us. I'm not sure if you have looked at our current comprehensive plan and reviewed what is in there, but it is lacking. And if somebody were, and you want to talk about combining and demolishing a house and building something larger, right now, there's nothing in our existing comprehensive plan to discourage that from happening. And so, again, our comprehensive plan is a guiding document. It's guiding us on what we want to be in the future. And if having that kind of language in there is saying, we're not okay with being like Roaring Fork, where you can come in and build what some have called a McMansion, right? You take a bunch of downtown lots, build a big house over those lots, and now you've got a condominium, right? There's nothing that's protecting us from that. That's why that policy is in the new draft. But we haven't gone over this draft yet, right? It's been on an agenda a few times. We've never had a chance to get there. I think it's pretty important that we start going over it. Okay. If you all are okay with going over it, I'm happy to do that. It's only 9 pages.
I do see that in the housing 13 or 14 and 15. That's addressed.
So what you're talking about, I'll read it out for the public. 14 says, the town shall discourage redevelopment and demolition practices that significantly reduce existing housing stock in older neighborhoods and that result in the displacement of very low and moderate income residents for special needs households. And then policy 15 says the town shall monitor all redevelopment and demolition activity to ensure that comparable relocation housing is available in accordance with the federal regulations, regardless of whether federal monies are used in the activity. And the town shall ensure that all adopted and proposed regulations maintain and encourage diversity in housing types that will support adequate relocation housing as required.
And I think it's important to know how to read the document. So those policies are what support the goal. And that goal for Housing 3 is to commit to inclusivity by ensuring a diversity of housing options that meet the needs of residents, including those for seniors and residents with special needs. If you go to the Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan, it talks about diversity of housing and being inclusive. And so this is a goal that was made based on what was in the HNA and the Housing Action Plan, and then policies to help support them. Jumping around, I don't think is going to be really good for any productive conversation. Can we start at the beginning of this housing element?
Well, that's what, I'm not starting at it. I didn't write it and I don't understand it. So I did start at the beginning and then everything kind of went dead. So do you want to start at the beginning?
Sure. And so I think it's really important because there's, people see that word urbanism or new urbanism. And there's this kind of, a fear about that word. And I think if you've read the charter for the new urbanism, you'll understand that this is about stopping urban sprawl. So stopping, and I've heard you, Chair Watson, talk about urban sprawl and saying that's not good for anyone. It's not good for this county, and to bring it, into more of a town and neighborhood. So I think it's important to say we stand for the rest. So this is the Congress for New Urbanism's charter. It was updated in summer of 24. We stand for the restoration of existing urban centers and towns within coherent metropolitan regions, the reconfiguration of sprawling suburbs into communities of real neighborhoods and diverse districts, the conservation of natural elements, and the preservation of our built legacy. I think that captures Paonia pretty well. And I've heard that in public outreach sessions that we've had, community discussions that we've had. There is this deep desire for conserving our natural environment. And so I think that we stand for kind of encapsulates that. Do you have a comment on it?
Yeah, actually, I do. So, I have been thinking about this. How many square miles is Paonia? 4 square miles? Is it?
It's under that.
It's under
100
that?
acres,
How many, it's 4 acres?
100.
100 acres. So
It's not a
it's,
section.
but it's not very big, right?
The section's 640 acres.
So how do we sprawl in this little town? And when I go like on my walk up onto Lamborn Mesa, what I see is a lot of sprawl. And it's not in town, it's in the county. And I see people coming here with their money, and everybody wants to have that 5-acre ranchette, that 20-acre ranchette. And we sell them a water tap. We're not selling them water taps now because we have a moratorium, but that's where the sprawl is happening. That's where people need to use cars all over the place. That's where you get non-walkable communities. It's not in the town of Paonia. So that's why I kind of don't think this applies.
Can I address that really quick? So we actually have an ordinance that says you will get into a pre-annexation agreement for building a new home. And so this is codified. If you're outside of the county, outside of town limits, you have a pre-annexation agreement that says, if you want water, you're going to build your home to town standards, which means you're going to follow our comprehensive plan, you're going to follow any of our planning ordinances, zoning ordinances, land use ordinances, and you're going to get a building permit from the town. And I can't tell you if it's been enforced prior to me. I can tell you I'm enforcing it. So it's an actual code, it's an actual ordinance in our code that we have to follow. The point of this comprehensive plan is to also look at a 3-mile jurisdiction, right? That's in that same statute that we've been referencing all night long and multiple times. Within that 3-mile jurisdiction, we're supposed to have some sort of control or say over what happens within that growth management area that the county has to also approve. And so that's the point of this comprehensive plan, right? It adds guidance for what happens to stop that urban sprawl. It provides guidance to the county that, hey, we have something in place that needs to be followed, and it directs people on what is and isn't acceptable.
So my understanding with that building permit thing, and I don't know, have any building permits been pulled since you've been here for out of town? It's also any development on the property, right? If they're on the town water, if they're directly billed by the town, if they're on a water company, that it doesn't apply.
Correct.
I understand.
So one,
And that's the thing is so when we're talking about like there's no building permit process in the county. So there's no way to even monitor development that's going in on the water system through water companies. And I mean, I still say, I will maintain that's where the sprawl is happening.
yeah, so we just
recently
recently had somebody that purchased a property that has on their deed, that deed restriction that says they enter into a pre-annexation agreement with the town of Pale. And that pre-annexation agreement was in place, that property sold, and now they have to go through our processes to build that property or build on that property in order to get connected to water.
I just remember the old town manager's house. Well, of course, he was on a water company, but he's in the growth area out there toward the Stop and Save. And it was less than a year ago. Well, it was about a year ago. They were doing a heavy remodel in that place and they never pulled any building permits. And that was even in the growth area. It was very visible. So, I don't know. It's expensive when you start like deciding to adopt these kind of new policies and with energy efficiency, and it's just going to drive the cost of things up. But why don't you move forward with this? I'll give you a chance to, I don't want to do back and forth because it'll take forever here, Stefan. So just give you a chance to present it and then, we can revisit things.
I just want you had asked.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Let me just unpack a few things here. We published a final draft of the master plan in June. It did not have all the legal elements that it needed to have. Were you aware of that when we published it?
Yes, after I read through the statutes. But Pete, you're going back on old history, but let me just tell you, this was the RFP that went out.
I'm just
It's-
asking, so
right.
the answer was yes.
I didn't know it until I looked at the statutes,
Were you aware?
because the RFP,
Yes.
You were aware? When were you aware that master plan was going to have elements missing?
I don't recall. If this is going to turn into this, I'm going to go home.
it's not really
Like, I'm
relevant
sorry, because I've had these meetings multiple times.
It's a simple question.
Well,
I don't think it's
Pete,
unreasonable.
it is, the RFP that went out was wholly inadequate, because when it went out in 2022, nobody knew what a master plan should have, including our administrator at the time. That's why we have had to do a lot of catch up. Because
But
we
at some
didn't
point,
have it all.
we were aware.
The public knew.
Right, so.
Where
Well, I'm sorry,
There is a
but
big, so.
What's the
let's-
relevance here?
The relevance is we told the town that we had a final draft.
From the consultant.
Well, is that clear to the town?
I don't know, but the consultant wasn't aware of the
Okay.
pieces that had to
Did
be
you
in
want to
there.
finish what you were saying, Kate?
Okay.
I'm sorry. And this is a work session, so it's a little bit more informal, but I don't want.
I mean, just that interaction right there, I feel very attacked just when I'm bringing up my concerns. So I don't need to bring up any concerns. We can, if bringing up concerns is going to elicit a walkout and a threat or a characterization of me looking back, then I can stop. Would you like me to stop?
Well, I'm trying to answer your question.
No, you're actually trying to stop me from bringing up my concerns.
Well, your concerns are, you know what, if pieces were missing, which they were,
Yes.
because the RFP was
Right.
not complete.
Okay.
The town takes responsibility for that, but that doesn't mean that the work stopped at what the RFP asked for, and then
Okay.
the other things were.
So we turned in an incomplete master plan, published it to the town, saying that this was a final draft. You're saying, I get it, there's an ambiguity there, like, right? But would you at least admit that the town might have viewed that as a final draft?
Absolutely not. I was in that meeting. No,
Okay,
no, Pete, absolutely not.
okay.
I mean, this is the schedule. This is what we've done. What's on our screen right now is what has been done for this entire comprehensive plan. Is going all the way back to the first community engagement session that Phoenix Rising had on April 27th, 2023, and then everything that's happened since then. So if you're going to ask when did I know that there was an element that was missing or elements that were missing, I would say probably June 21st, when it was submitted to staff. And then if right after that, the next month, on July 18th, there was a joint Board of Trustees and Planning Commission meeting to present a plan and determine a process and adoption for that, to adopt that plan. By August 2nd, there were comments that were made. We got comments back from everybody. We started discussing that final draft on August 5th. I mean, you can see all of this stuff.
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's all right here.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I think I totally agree with what's on here. I don't think any of this addresses my concerns at all. So my concern is that we now have two of the most important elements of the comprehensive plan that were missing from the final draft. We hired a consulting group. They did all of this work to get community feedback. And then but as part of that, for whatever reason, because the RFP was incorrect, because the town administrator at the time, and obviously up till June 24th, didn't realize that those were missing from the comprehensive plan. We are at a place where I'm at a place where I think that the comprehensive plan, except for these two elements, reflects the input from the community. I do not think that the housing element reflects the input from the community. I've made that clear. I asked on September, well, it's been about 2 months now. So it was the board directed at some point the board said.
And the planning commission.
The board and the planning commission directed the Stefan to write to incorporate the housing element, or sorry, the housing action plan into the housing element.
No, it was to create the housing element.
The word
Based off
the word
of-
incorporate, it wasn't incorporate the housing
To
element.
accept the housing
No,
element.
that was
as
in
part of-
2023.
Yeah,
So what
and
came
then
about?
after that, the planning commission had nothing to do with it.
So the housing element was not supposed to be an incorporation of the housing action plan?
The housing action plan and needs assessment is too big a document to just be shoved into the comprehensive plan. It needed to be
one's-
distilled, and in the May meeting, the
Yes.
joint meeting you were not in attendance to, the planning commission and the trustees both said, asked Stefan to create the housing element that we're reviewing now based on the housing needs assessment and action plan.
September.
May. This was a May decision made by the joint planning commission and the
I don't remember
trustees.
that. I must
Yes.
not have been there.
No, you were there, you were there, you were there.
What was the
And-
vote and
It was
do we have
unanimous.
the minutes for that?
I'm just,
Wasn't our meeting canceled in May?
no, it doesn't.
No, we
Would you
had-
Please listen, this is what happened. The motion was made by both bodies to ask the administrator to create the housing element based on the housing need assessment and action plan. And I have to tell
That was in
you,
September.
no, it was in May.
It was just
It was
not.
in
September, sorry,
September.
sorry about that, September, it was in September.
Thank you.
I'm
So-
sorry, but it was done, and we now have a really good element.
No,
So now we're in agreement. So it was, but it was,
Sorry,
where we
sorry about the
disagree
mic.
is, and I have looked at the language, it was to incorporate. Now, and I'm not saying that that means not to distill or that it needed to be the whole thing, but it was to incorporate the housing action plan into the housing
Here's the,
element.
here's the motion.
So the motion trustee Hunter makes a motion, seconded by trustee Stelter to ask town administrator Wynn to have the draft order element. So that one carried unanimously. Right underneath that, it says Commissioner Howe makes a motion, seconded by Commissioner Hunter, to ask the Board of Trustees to ask town administrator Wynn to come up with objectives, goals, and policies for the housing element of the master plan. The motion carried unanimously. Trustee Stelter makes a motion, seconded by Hunter, to direct town administrator Wynn to come up with objectives, goals, and policies for the housing element of the master plan. Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. So, but is it not, I mean, there's never been language that we were going to incorporate the housing action plan into the housing element?
Oh, it was kind of.
It was done in 23, there was a motion.
Well, I
the
think the
trustees did.
board at that time thought, I think that was their thinking, was the housing action plan was gonna be all this housing stuff, so the contractor with the comprehensive plan didn't have to worry about that. That's
Mhm.
the sense I got as being an audience member, a member of the public. I don't know how wise that was, but.
This is there,
I
but-
just want to speak that as the contractor, they were informed to work with Shay, who would be contract for the housing needs assessment. But that she would be conducting the housing element, at which point, when both documents were complete. So we were not instructed to create that element, we were specifically instructed not to create that element because it would be created from this other process.
Okay.
When this process was completed, there was to be a process of incorporation. Some of the findings from that housing needs assessment did go into the draft that we submitted, but not as a separate element. They were incorporated into other aspects of the plan. I just want to ask, what was the other element that you felt was missing?
Is the infrastructure element?
Was it what, would- are
We
you
had
talking?
an infrastructure element in that plan, which included water. And then we were directed in different times to pull trees in or out of that, or sidewalks and roads as separate or incorporated.
You're talking about the statute, G and J, is that what you mean? What's missing?
I just had heard that two elements were missing, so I was just trying to clarify. One, the housing element, we were told explicitly not to because this needs assessment would be brought in the end and incorporated into it.
Who
Yeah.
were you told not to? Who told you that?
Probably
Was
Mary
it
Beth.
was it the planning commission that directed you to do that?
So during the course of our contract, we had several different points of contact because at one point the planning commission wasn't meeting anymore regularly. And so at that point, we took direction from either the board and or the mayor and the administrator. So there was a point where we started with the planning commission. They stopped meeting. I'm not sure what happened. It was inconsistent. And then at some point we went back to direction from the town. There was a change in administration. We ended up with the elements that were there, including infrastructure, which did include water, streets, trees, sewer, and sidewalks. And then there's the parks and element of it as well. How those elements got broken out into infrastructure or not were rearranged several times. But all of those pieces were in the draft that we submitted. And we were aware that it did not have the housing piece. But again, some of those findings were incorporated into the broader aspects, specifically around the land use recommendations or type of areas, like in town where we would have a historic core or where we would have, more light industrial. And those definitions were informed by that housing needs assessment.
And if I may, so Chair, if I may,
We're in a work session.
okay, that's right, rules are suspended. So what Phoenix Rising put together, what Phoenix Rising Research put together was an infrastructure section that ended up in the appendices. Or you had like water, each individual part in the appendices. And what was created was based off of their work was this infrastructure element. Everything in this document that's in red is added, and it's more added for historical context, where we are at, what got us to where we are with our water moratorium, things like that.
I just want to clarify, expand on what he's saying, is that originally that had all been in the original document, and then we were directed to take it out and put it in appendices, where that information was significantly cut down. If you want, I can give you the 34-page version of the water element alone. We still have that version, but there was a lot of like back and forth as to what was wanted to be included where. So just to expand on what Stefan is saying about where it's in the appendices.
And correct. And so what you're looking at now is goals for the infrastructure element. So these were things that we've already talked about. You guys have already approved them to go into this final draft that's done. But we turned them into goals and then policies. So there's a general infrastructure section, that talks about good policies like coordinate infrastructure repairs and upgrades across utilities and other property maintenance needs. That's that dig once policy, right? If you're going to tear up a street, might as well do the water pipes underneath it. That's what that policy says. Then water. So anything not in red is original water element.
And again, if you ever want to see, we did a whole much larger discussion and summary, because one of the initial things in the initial RFP that was not really geared towards a real comprehensive plan was a summary. If you want a summary of everything we found in the like hundreds of pages of water documents, which I'm sure you've also read at this point, I'm happy to provide you that summary. That's the thing that's like 34 pages. And like, here's what recommended next steps are, because in our initial RFP, it said, tell us recommended next steps based on all of these papers, and it named them all. So that in the original section had all of that stuff in it. That has all come out and is not in here except for in terms of how the policies are guiding management, which a lot of those management best practices were derived from those initial, mostly the large engineering reports on the system.
And so to be really clear, you were instructed with that original RFP to have a condensed comprehensive plan and make it as small as possible, which didn't really accomplish what we had to do. So
yeah, and I think, we were originally guided to a statute in Colorado that says a comprehensive plan really only has to include like a recreation and tourism element, and not the expanded version where it talks about all the other elements about what should be in a plan. I also consulted with several different planners. Reading the RFP, they said this does not look like a traditional comprehensive plan. When Administrator Wynn came on board and made it clear that he wanted a traditional conservation plan, we went out and hired Shay Coburn of Urban Rural Continuum, who has a planning degree and does this for work. So we could create a legally like official document that would fulfill the needs of the town from a comp plan standpoint. However, that was very challenging for me because we had just done a year's worth of work on something that was mostly a summary exercise on recommended next steps based on the large amount of data. And then also, if you haven't seen it, we did share the full data room or Google folder that had all of the files we were instructed to review in that process. So it has been a messy, iterative process. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that or see any versions of it.
When you came up with different elements, did you provide citations of community feedback, explanations of what those policies would be, things like that?
I'm not quite sure about how to answer that question. So we do cite, there was a version where we had cited all of the official documents, like see X document on X page for this thing on water or sewer. And then we also had cited community feedback, and then we provided all of the notes from those sections in the data that we gave the town. So we'd say like this, and was every single thing in there cited directly back to those things? No, but if you look at a comp plan, that's not traditional practice. It's not like an academic paper where it's like, so-and-so this year. So, again, originally when we had been directed to do a summary, we were a lot more thorough in citations. As it evolved, we did defend each of the policies are linked to community input and or large documents that the town had provided as background and then best practices in the planning community. So again, I'm happy to answer like specific questions on that.
My questions aren't really for any of the, I do think that you provided background for all the policies you wrote. The reason the thing that I am stuck on, and as everyone here knows, is in September when the new housing element was written. The goals of the new housing element are absolutely derived directly from the housing action plan. The 28 policies are not. They are, of course, linked to the goals, but they are, as Stefan wrote back in an email, derived from his experience of writing comprehensive plans. And where we are at a loggerhead is that I asked for an explanation, citations, community input for all those things. I have been given none of that. In fact, the first explanation I've been given for any policy was something I had to read today off Facebook. So even though I've asked for that in writing many times, going back 2 months, even though I asked for a vote to then direct because I was told I wouldn't be getting those, I asked the rest of the planning commission to vote to direct Stefan to give an explanation, not to incorporate those things into the housing element, but to just give an explanation. I've been given no explanation. So given no explanation of these housing policies.
If I can, you at the last meeting, no, when it was on the agenda. So I've been trying to get this, to make this discussion happen in a public setting, and you weren't at the last meeting. And so here I am today at this meeting, ready to go over it. And instead we're doing this.
We didn't talk about it at the last meeting because that agenda was way too big.
Well, you said that you didn't want to get into it because Pete was not.
Exactly, but it was
So-
also too late, Steph, and you can't clog our agenda that way. I didn't ask for that to be put on the agenda.
I didn't
and
make your
it up
agenda.
there.
So
I sent, first of
Oh, I'm
all,
sorry.
I did not fail to attend the last meeting, as you put in your email. The last meeting was set only 16 days in advance. We have not had regular meetings on this commission for months now. I've been asking to have regular meetings. We do not have, I live across Colorado. There's first and third Thursday of every month, planning commission has a meeting. Our meetings are all over the place. So it is not my fault that I can't attend meetings that only get set this meeting itself was only, the last 2 meetings were only set 16 days ahead of time. So because of that, I took the time to write out very detailed questions that I sent to you 5 hours before the meeting. I've been asking the same thing for 2 months, which is a written explanation. These policies, some of them may be good, some of them might be. I asked this before, Mayor, you said that these are just, you cited one of them and said this is just common sense. I don't think when it comes to most of these things, they're common sense. I think that there are many policies that appear to be common sense on the surface. And when you dig down into the details, they are not. That's why I would like to have some elaboration on what these policies are. And I have been denied that.
So I would like to add that I have no problem with any of the goals or policies in the housing element. I've looked at them several times. I've read the Housing Needs Assessment Action Plan. I like the whole content. So I think rather than you decide that there are things you don't like, you have already identified, I think, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 policies you don't like, which is really constructive. Why don't we look at those policies and you can explain what you don't like about them? But I am not going to vote to go through every piece of this because they are common sense and they do come from housing needs assessment and the community input for the construction of the plan.
If they came from the housing needs assessment, the housing policies, then it would be easy to cite them.
They're not verbatim,
They're not at all bound in
which
there at
is
all.
what, when
Can
you
we
do
go
this
over
sort
it?
of thing.
Yeah, but perhaps we should read them and go over them.
Yes, let's do that rather than go back and
Is
forth.
that acceptable to everyone if we read them and go over them?
So we're going through your work tonight, right? That's what you're going through. When you say read them and go over, what is them?
The housing element.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought we were gonna do, so I was a little surprised by the silence at the beginning of this meeting.
I was,
I thought it was a chance for you to kind of, you're the one who wrote it, Stefan. And so like all these other portions that we've written, I saw this when we agreed to let you write it as a springboard to kind of start greasing the wheels, and it could be amended. It's not like the final draft, just so.
absolutely right. And that's,
If I may, what I heard though was you asked for that right off the bat and there was silence. But then at the point when Stefan said, can I go through this? And he started going through it, then Commissioner McCarthy had a question and we ended up talking about this. So I think,
Well,
yeah,
let's-
administrator was trying to go through this.
And actually, Stefan asked if I had a comment.
But I believe that was because you were raising your hand.
Okay,
No, actually, it
we're
wasn't.
gonna get sidetracked here.
I think we should just go through it.
okay. If I may, so the introduction section is explaining exactly what these goals and policies are attempting to achieve. These great neighborhoods things, this comes from a University of Notre Dame study on what makes great neighborhoods. So it's identity shaped by its physical setting, streets, architecture, history, and residents. Yeah, you can read through all of those. But I think the real meat and potatoes here that there's questions on are goals and policies. This vision and these values, I haven't heard anybody say anything negative or have any questions about the visions and values. So I'll just go into goals. Goal number 1, maintain Paonia as a community that is accessible to a range of income levels, ages, and households by ensuring adequate and affordable housing options are available. We did a housing needs assessment, housing action plan, talked about affordable housing. Goal number 2, or housing number 2, enhance and maintain the character of Paonia's existing residential neighborhoods, balance the need to accommodate infill development.
Stefan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, so going back to housing 1, how would the town do that? What are you thinking when you say, how does the town ensure adequate and affordable housing options are available?
So that's what the policies underneath the housing goal attempt are
Okay,
meant
so
to achieve.
I'll ask that, I'll
Yeah.
just go back to that when you get to the policies.
Is it the case that the goals are derived directly from the housing action?
Correct.
That's correct.
I mean, yeah,
More,
Yes.
like almost verbatim.
That
correct?
one sounds.
not verbatim. Because, so the housing action plan, housing needs assessment was really done to help us achieve Prop 123. So we opted into Proposition 123. That's to be able to get state funding for meeting affordable housing goals. And I think we had to meet five a year for 4 years. 5 new homes that are affordable in 4 years to be able to do that. But as part of that, you had to finish this housing needs assessment and then have an action plan. And so that was really meant to be Prop 123. And so we've taken what was done through that 170-page document and tried to distill it down into these goals. So kind of, yes, but it's not verbatim. Commit to inclusivity by ensuring a diversity of housing options that meet the needs of residents, including those for seniors and residents with special needs. We do have a special needs population here that are independent people that live on their own. Housing goal number 4, preserve views to the mountains, natural amenities, and scenic vistas from the public realm. So, I mean, that's what I've heard in some of our public outreach meetings is we love it here because it's beautiful, right? So you're trying to protect that scenic vista. Housing 5, identify, recognize, and protect Paonia's unique and irreplaceable history and cultural heritage. That should be cultural, not cultural heritage. Yeah. Housing 6, preserve, protect, and stabilize the character and visibility of residential neighborhoods, particularly within areas with natural hazards such as floodplain and steep slope conditions, or require demolition when rehabilitation is not possible nor economically feasible, such as in areas where a significant concentration of substandard housing exists that contributes to negative neighborhood or environmental conditions. That's FEMA flood maps. So if you're going to build a house or your house gets wiped away by a flood and you want to rebuild that house or try to rehab that house in a flood zone, you're gonna have to follow FEMA guidelines for building the house. Housing 7, encourage building and construction strategies, methods and practices that promote energy efficiency through low-impact design principles, including the use of renewable energy resources in the construction of new homes and the rehabilitation of existing homes. So the state is promoting this energy efficiency thing with new homes and remodeling homes. It's also promoting like straw bale construction, so different types of construction that we're seeing happen already in town or right outside it. Okay, so how do we meet housing goal number 1? That's that maintain Paonia as a community that is accessible to a range of income levels, ages, and households by ensuring adequate and affordable housing options are available. Policy housing number 1, work with Delta County, private water companies, and developers to develop housing units designed and priced for employees living and working in Delta County, with a primary focus on those living and working in Paonia or within the Paonia census tract.
Not on that particular policy, but what are, like, can you define what a policy is here?
Yes, so this is a guidance document, right? So this is, when you're looking at a comprehensive plan, this is the community telling a developer or the town, the administrative government, what is acceptable to our community for building. That's essentially what these are.
I just want to clarify if it's helpful. I don't know if it is or not, but one of the things that was a big point of confusion with the public was this word policy. And like, does it mean that, you know, we have a parking policy that says you can't park here? And to Stefan's point, like, this is a guidance document, and really what it's supposed to do is say, these are the things that we want to live up to. How we live up to them is actually going to require rules, laws, and new actual functional policies that are passed by the Board of Trustees to actually become the way we do business. This is supposed to be the guiding document on how we do business, and therefore it can be used if some developer comes in and says, we've got this great new development, and a bunch of community members are like, that is not consistent with our goal that we have for our community. It's going to block our scenic views and destroy our agricultural heritage. This document will not have the policy that prevents that development from going in, but it should have the guidance that says what we want. And so you can like point back to it. And so the word policy I hear is almost like policy light. It's like, it's not like a law or a rule. And that was a big point of confusion in community understanding of what this plan was. And really that it should be broad enough that it's not overly prescriptive, but then the planning commission and the board, after it's passed, should take directive from it to go out and go ahead and like, how do we implement this? Also to your point earlier about like, well, it doesn't affect anything outside the town. Technically it should have the 2-mile radius around it. So we should also be able to influence the character of development. Like, we don't want a CAFO to go in right next to town. So we would want this plan passed because that 2-mile radius would say, okay, this is not a type of use that fits within our comprehensive plan, like guidance.
2 or 3 miles?
Sorry, 3 miles.
And to clarify, CAFOs are confined animal feeding operations, and they are the worst. So.
Yeah, and I don't think it's been, I've like lived in a different land most of the time right now, so it is 3 miles. But it isn't just Paonia proper, right? It does influence the character of the surrounding development and community, and it really should do so, especially in light of what we discovered in the process work, competing views between what Delta County views as desired development and what the residents of Paonia view as desired development. This is not to say anything here or there, but just that please think of policy as like policy light. And also, if anything looks overly prescriptive, it probably shouldn't be in the comp plan. You know what I mean? It should be like, it should be something you can guide yourself back to, not something that tells you exactly what to do.
So in your professional opinion, having looked at all these policies, are any of them overly prescriptive?
So I have not reviewed the housing policies in detail. At the last meeting, we came to an agreement that once the planning commission approved this draft going out, that then we would support community engagement and education around this new element, at which point in time I would formally read all the stuff that's in here. and, be prepared to do that, but I'm not prepared to tell you that today. Because I've been waiting for the planning commission to get a draft that they felt like they wanted to share with the public, and then knowing that that would change likely based on public feedback. That's how we've operated thus far, with not having direction yet to review it.
I guess that's kind of where the sticking point is, isn't it? Because you submitted, like, we were able to approve a draft to go out to the community, trusting your guidance, but now we don't have that. We will only get that once we approve it to go out to the community.
I don't know that I think we'll have to work out your process internally, and also again on this stuff, we really looked to Shay and urban rural continuum. So, I don't know the answer to that. I know I have not reviewed it.
They just did the housing action plan. They didn't really do the housing.
But she did work on our team and did incorporate some of them, like I said, into the land, the zone, the areas of town, and like, so no, she did not write this, like stuff like that. I don't know what to say. The process was different, and that's why I recommended at the last meeting that we do an educational hearing to educate on why these are out there, and then gather feedback in a number of different ways from the community, and then provide that to you all to incorporate back, into the plan.
And we're doing exactly what we did with each element, right? So planning commission work session, future land use element. It was, these policies were created, they were presented, we had a work session on them, and we accepted comments, and we set a date or timeline on those comments. Tonight, we're going over the same thing. It's the same process. And we've been waiting to have this housing element on to be discussed on an agenda. Here we are tonight. Policy housing number 2, promote the use of alternative zoning techniques and mechanisms to provide a mix of housing types within residential neighborhoods, which can include reducing minimum lot sizes and encouraging accessory dwelling units that may be restricted as long-term rentals with affordable leases. This policy, these alternative zoning techniques, what that would be is kind of what you see in the future land use element when we're talking about mixed use zoning designations or those kinds of things that you're seeing in that future land use map for the VOTEC school being, reclassified as something that we'd be okay with being mixed use.
So that's something I was kind of sticking up on, Stefan, because when you say alternative zoning techniques, so you're talking about mixed use, and that makes sense, but what could alternative zoning techniques mean? I mean, that could have to do with any property anywhere in town. It could be some alternative that we haven't heard about yet. So, I mean, it seems so open-ended to say it that way.
So you don't want to be too restrictive, so that if there is an idea that you actually like, you would come in and you could go as, let's say it comes in as a planned unit development PUD. And they've got this idea to have different zoning things, like they might want to have a convenience store in the middle of this PUD that comes in. You want to give yourself the ability to consider that as the planning commission, because that's where a PUD goes through first before it goes to the board of trustees.
But it has to go in the right zone. You can't do that in like an R1 zone, right?
Think about it as like new development, brand new development. They're annexing into town because they're continuous.
Riverbank out there.
Sure. But that's in town already. So you have to find one that's not.
Well, we
in town.
voted to annex it in town for the PUD.
I know. That's
No, it's a state.
But case in
properties.
point is Silverleaf.
Okay.
yeah.
That's a
Right?
really
It was in
good
town,
example.
though.
It's
Yeah.
in town.
But it's a zoning type that's, it's this shared communal space kind of courtyard kind of living, right? Kind of communal courtyard kind of stuff out there.
Yes, it's technically an HOA, but we have shared space in the middle of the development.
And so you don't want to make it so restrictive that you can't consider those things, right? This isn't just saying we're going to allow it. This is saying, this is a guidance document that when something comes in, you can review it and say, hey, this is where the comprehensive plan would support this, or this is where this comprehensive plan doesn't support it.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's 2 housing policies in that single policy there. You've got the alternative zoning techniques, and then you have something about accessory dwelling units that may be restricted as, couldn't those be two different housing policies?
They sure could be, sure. If you'd like to break them out, that's something that can be done.
I mean, they seem tangentially related, but not necessarily related at all.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put a note there to think about, because I can't like make that decision right now, but I'd like to contemplate that if that's okay.
So, okay, sure. Policy housing number 3, provide fast track processing and other incentives for proposed housing developments intended for persons with special housing needs, including the elderly, persons aged 60 years or older, the handicapped, low-income residents, and large families. This is something that Prop 123 requires in order to get state funding for. So having some sort of fast track processing, that was something that was came out of like goals to achieve within the housing action plan. And so that's why that's included in there, so that we're not stopping or precluding ourselves from applying for state funding to help with affordable housing.
What is fast track processing mean?
60 days or less for approval.
So you can't have public hearings?
You would still have a public hearing. It would be approved within 60. And then that's if there's a special use review, you would have to do public hearings. But this is like somebody turns in an application because they want to build an affordable housing unit, let's say in R3, right? So R3 is our highest density area. That means that internally as staff and with our third-party consultant, we'd have to turn that around within 60 days.
So this is a lot of information. This is what I've been asking for.
Okay.
You said you didn't need any of this. Is this new information for you, or are you aware of it?
I find it all interesting, but I didn't need it. You know, I felt like I trust all the input that's come into this housing element. But this is what we do. This is exactly what we should be doing, is going through this element.
The fast track makes me a little uncomfortable. I think of Marion Haste, Repent and Leisure. There are all sorts of like adages about fast tracking, but that's okay. I'm just expressing my hesitation.
I'm not aware of what that means.
What are large families?
Fast track.
That could be, I don't know, whatever. I mean, there's no definition for large families, but this is just an example of that. So let's say it's 6 people, 7 people in a house. It could be multi-generational.
And that's in the proposition that it's handicap, low income. and
No,
large family?
providing fast track processing.
I don't think you can
Okay.
discriminate against people who aren't related to each other living together anymore.
Correct.
So can you actually say things like large families?
You can't.
So part of what my email was 2 months ago was to get these details so that I could go back and research and look at that. I have not been given any of that. So,
Okay. Are you able to get this? I mean,
of course,
Okay, good.
of course, but like, it's much easier to have the explanations in writings to get to go back and research these types of things. You were pretty adamant about not providing those things, were you not?
We are going through the same exact process that Phoenix Rising Resources went through for each element. And I'm giving it to you now. This is what's happening.
You're also saying that I wasn't here at this. I have been asking for it for 2 months.
You weren't at the last meeting where it was on an agenda.
I've been asking for it for 2 months.
We weren't gonna get to.
I've been
it.
asking for it for 2 months.
We're going through it now, Pete.
And I've been asking for it for 2 months.
Okay, let's have some decorum here. No impatience,
So we're
please.
going through, but I'm not prepared I don't have all the details. You're giving me like propositions and different things. I don't have that in front of me. I haven't been able to
So
research those things. No, but it wasn't referenced. I asked for references. and
It's in a
citations.
footnote.
Pete, can you get a transcript of this meeting? Is it gonna be
Fine, but
possible?
it,
to-
like transcripts are,
Yeah, I know, it's a little cumbersome.
it's not the same. Anyway,
Okay, I know, but that's really lengthy. How did you get the transcripts on YouTube? I haven't ever been able to figure.
No, I just can't, when I review, I have to watch and rewatch and listen to everything.
Oh,
So-
I have
They used to do
to,
it. They used to do it.
I
I have
don't have
tools. I can get all the transcripts.
Okay, so let's,
So-
continue. So where were we?
Policy housing 4.
Okay,
It says acknowledge the role of the private sector as a necessary partner in addressing the community's affordable workforce housing needs. The town doesn't build homes, right? And so this is saying that we're acknowledging that the private sector builds homes. policy housing 5. Are you gonna do this for every policy?
Well, what?
Can I get through at least this first goal first before you start? I'd really like to get through that one.
Yeah, okay, so let's have a method here. So Stefan, you're gonna get through the goals, and then if you could just take some notes, we can go back, Pete, and, is that okay? Okay, so the town doesn't build homes, is what you're saying.
That's correct. Policy housing number 5, use annexations as an opportunity to expand Paona's supply of affordable and workforce housing and continue to require pre-annexation agreements for new construction within the growth management area as a condition of getting domestic water service. Policy housing number 6, support the development of housing options designed to accommodate multi-generational needs to allow residents the opportunity to age in place. Policy housing number 7, take advantage of all opportunities to add needed affordable and workforce housing to Paonia and the surrounding area while being mindful of the town's desire to avoid overconcentration and overly dense in any one neighborhood. And that is it for that first goal.
Okay. So, going back, did you have a question about policy number 4? Acknowledge the role of private sector as the necessary partner in addressing a community's affordable and workforce housing needs.
So the purpose of this is someone's looking at this to understand what our policy like is. I don't know how an acknowledgement that the private sector builds homes is a policy like. I just, how is that? I just don't understand how that fits into this at all.
So you think it's kind of unnecessary to say that?
How would the board of trustees use that to enact policies?
Because it would give the staff the ability to spend their time meeting with a private person who wants to build a house. Remember, this is intended for the staff to use as guidance for the overarching multiple ways that housing takes place in the community. There is nothing untoward about that statement.
No one said it was untoward.
I know,
I'm asking.
I know, but you
I
act
mean,
as if it's a bad thing.
I don't. Can we-
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Hold on.
I'm sorry,
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Hold on a second, because this is going on way too much.
I apologize.
This continuing characterizing what I'm saying, it is.
But let me ask you if you could see.
What is that sign
If
say?
you could say it differently, you have an attitude in your voice that's very, it's quite, it's.
Does the town
let's not-
administrator, the town administrator just threatened to
Wait.
walk out?
It feels very critical as
Paige.
opposed to being more
Okay,
constructive, so I
here,
apologize.
maybe a question.
If you're gonna criticize, then be an equal opportunity criticizer.
Okay, I have a
Not
question.
just to not just to the people that aren't on your
So
side.
acknowledge the role of the private sector. Does that mean just little old mom and pop trying to work on their house, or are we giving like preference to developers? Is that what we're saying?
There's no preference here. This is acknowledging that the town doesn't build homes. That we as staff have to be able to work with somebody in developing a plan that would be okay for the planning commission to pass, or at least consider, and then have it go to the board of trustees for their consideration.
So if that's the obvious process that we have to go through, is that a policy you need to put in? That's why do you have to state that?
If you hadn't read this before now, would you have known that that's the way things work?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the town doesn't build homes. We never have. We can't afford that, number one. And number two, if you have questions, you go in and you ask things of staff. And I know what's been happening is then the building inspector charges you up the wazoo.
They sure did.
So like normal people are priced out of that. So
So if I can, on social media today, right, there's a post that took off because it said the town's gonna demolish houses. I'm not demolishing anything. I can't demolish homes. That's, I
can
mean,
you condemn them?
there is,
Is that what they're
I don't
saying?
condemn, the building official condemns.
So where are these blighted neighborhoods? I kind of am curious about that. We should have a blight map if we're really talking about blight.
If
If
we're
we
gonna
just
talk-
stick to the
I was gonna
goals
say,
here.
if we're gonna talk
We
about
talk
blight,
about blight in a few different places.
yeah, if we're
so
gonna
that's
talk about
probably not-
blight,
Yeah,
like
let's wait till we
actually,
get to that.
and actually
Yeah.
doing something about blight, then we'd be talking about TIF districts. Okay, were there any other questions on like housing 5, 6, or 7?
Yeah,
I
this
thought there was
thing,
6
using
on this one.
annexations as an opportunity to expand the supply of affordable workplace housing. I really think that we need to have a clear annexation policy, frankly. And so maybe we need to recommend developing a clear annexation policy.
I would just say that we heard that a lot from the town and the community, that we did need a clear annexation policy. I would suggest to you that that's going to be a whole process with coming up with that, and it's going to be there are a lot of differing opinions on that, and yet there's some really important considerations the town needs to look at to remain a functional entity from a budget standpoint, and that's going to be a major undertaking and one that should be done head on. I don't know if a comp plan ever gives that specific of a direction though, but I think you could, after you have learned from the comp plan, go out and say, okay, everybody, we need to go do this. And that's what we should do from a comp plan, is in that process, learn what policies you want to undertake right afterwards.
Okay,
So
I just saw it in Ridgeway's comp plan, and apparently Ridgeway's comp plan was very good.
Mhm.
So I thought maybe, and that looked good to me.
specifically addressed, I don't think Ridgeway said, go create an annexation plan, right?
They did say they did say something about.
They say something about like establish this thing. or-
Establish it.
Yeah,
and
they
access it.
don't write exactly, so that would be the type of like level that I would recommend.
Exactly.
Saying you should do exactly this, if you don't want to get stuck into that, you really need a bigger process for the.
Yeah, so I mean, if it could be written in a way that's appropriate, let's say,
Right.
but you use the words.
Yeah.
Because it kind of triggers the thought later on.
Right, and like you said, we should, as soon as this is figured out and the right words are established, the planning, you guys should go do that, but that's gonna be a big process.
Yeah,
The planning commission will be part of leading and need a lot of community input and some real budget background done in order to inform it in a cohesive and like sane way.
yeah,
We do have a chapter 15 on annexation and opinion with code. So really what this is referencing is we would use that procedure to, as an opportunity to expand and bring in affordable housing that is, around the fringes of town into town. And that procedure for annexations was last updated in 2015. I believe it's on our consultants' sustainable, what are they, sustainable solutions, who's working on our code rewrite to also talk about updating some things in there.
okay. So housing policy 6. Support the development of housing options designed to accommodate multi-generation, can't say that, needs to allow residents the opportunity to age in place.
So this could mean many different things. It could mean that you would have multiple generations living under one roof. It could mean that there are homes for the elderly to downsize into. That was in our housing needs assessment. So that they could vacate like a larger house, sell it, and then move into something that's all on one floor that's smaller. We actually had a resident come up at our last board meeting who wants to do just that. That was talking about wanting to build something so that her son could move into the larger house. I mean, so that's what this housing policy is meant to achieve.
Okay, questions? Okay. 7, take advantage of all opportunities to add needed affordable and workforce housing to Paonia and the surrounding area while being mindful of the town's desire to avoid over-concentration and overly dense construction in any one neighborhood. Okay, so we've addressed like annexing, so we're not like doing just the stack and pack strategy, but there's actually creating more housing in areas where there's no housing, but not sprawling, because we're not big enough to sprawl, right?
Yeah, think of this policy as like a catch-all, right? It's saying, hey, look, if there's a grant out there that helps us put in infrastructure for someone that's wanting to build affordable housing, we should take advantage of that. And as staff, it's giving us guidance to say, hey, look, board of trustees, this is something that we ought to go after. It's within our comprehensive.
Infrastructure grants, okay.
Think of it that way. But it's a catch-all to keep
Who
our,
pays the match for those kind of grants? I mean, is that gonna be borne by the town in general? Like if they have a 25% match or something, could that drive the cost of housing up for everybody else?
by not being prescriptive, it could be anything. It could be the town matching it. It could be a public-private partnership with the developer saying, hey, we will pony up this amount for the match, but you've got to come up with the rest. It could be anything. It's just saying that we're not going to close the door on that opportunity.
Okay,
Maybe we can go to housing too.
was that, did you have a question?
No, I'd like to suggest that we move on to go
Yeah.
housing too.
That's what we're next here. 7 is the last one.
So goal housing number 2 and how,
Okay, so we didn't have any questions about 7. That was kind of cut and dry, right? Okay, goal housing 2.
enhance and maintain the character of Paonia's existing residential neighborhoods, balance the need to accommodate infill development. Housing 8, policy housing 8 says support enhancement programs and efforts to strengthen existing or aging residential neighborhoods.
What is aging? Oh, you mean people aging or housing is aging?
Housing, right?
Okay.
Housing that's not energy efficient, housing that it doesn't meet the needs of the people actually living inside of it. It could be any of that.
Okay,
Neighborhoods with crumbling infrastructure. Which we got a lot.
like trees and stuff?
Trees could, yeah,
Branches.
it's everything within that element, so trees could be included. Right, because we're talking about keeping our downtown and our residential neighborhoods cool. You do that with tree canopy. So,
Okay. So policy 9 was support flexibility.
Yep, support flexibility in building design and type to allow neighborhoods to continue meeting the needs of communities such as senior housing, intergenerational families, and special needs housing. This is partially derived from what is in the statutes about like group homes and senior housing. You've got to have a provision of that in your comprehensive plan, but it also allows for like ADA compliant homes or like different types of design, like straw bale homes, things like that. Different types of building materials.
Okay, but I
3D printed houses. It's a thing now.
okay. A question about that, but I guess the thing about the housing action plan and housing needs assessment and all this like ADU stuff, it's kind of turned zoning on its ear because things aren't really R1 anymore. You're looking at R2 everywhere. And so I guess what I wonder about is it's like, do you have any security as a homeowner to know that anything goes? I mean, or does anything go in this new world so when we say these things, I always wonder what it actually means.
Yeah, well, to be clear, we're not doing anything with zoning with our comprehensive plan. There's no zoning changes happening. We're not changing anybody's zoning.
I know there's no zoning, but the thing is that when we start talking about 2 houses per lot, that's R2. That's
Well,
not R1 anymore. So I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just saying there's this fundamental shift. Now that we're talking about 2 houses per lot in R1, you don't have R1 anymore. You don't have one single family residential anymore.
And so what this comprehensive plan is saying, look at accessory dwelling units. That came out of the housing action plan, right? It says look at allowing for accessory dwelling units, but regulate them, right? And so this isn't regulating ADUs, it's not allowing ADUs, it's just saying we will look at it and consider it.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's legislative, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'm communicating very well, but let's just move on.
In your opinion, maintaining the character of existing residential neighborhoods, would something about short-term rentals be appropriate here?
I don't think so. So that's a very specific use. This is talking about infill development. So I have a house that's dilapidated, it is uninhabitable, I want to tear it down. I'm not going to build something that's not in the same character of that neighborhood.
So the,
So it's not going to be like a 4-story condominium.
so the infill development is the key of that goal here, not the maintaining the character of the existing residential neighborhood.
Maintaining the character is that as well.
So isn't not having, I mean, is it within the character of a residential neighborhood to have half the homes be hotels? Seems like that is very relevant.
Like businesses, you know,
I mean,
It
unoccupied.
seems more relevant than almost anything that's there.
well, what would you, I guess, what would you propose there? Because if you've got to be careful to not propose like actual regulation or like legislative action. It's, what would you propose to be in there?
Encourage owner occupation of houses and resident. I don't, but it's not, well, then what do you do with long-term
I mean, I'm happy to propose
renters?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
no,
not too
seriously, propose a policy, that would be good. Just keep in mind that we're not regulating anything, doing any sort of regulation of this. It's just, you would have to use words like encourage or support, things.
I guess that's what, but regulation very well likely can come out of this, right? This is policy light, as we said.
Yeah, and it should, I mean, one of the things that's so hard about this whole conversation is that you all need to have these conversations, but they need to happen once you have a direction that you can then go have them under. And so it's like the pre-thing, right? And you can't have those conversations now because this isn't setting the law, but you need to give yourself direction to go ahead. And if you need to reestablish zoning, reestablish zoning. If you need to have a conversation on what the interpretation of that zone is, or if this new comp plan directionality may need to change. This may create a directionality that creates a need to change the zoning in the future. So you do need to be aware of that. But again, this is not the actual thing that's making the change. It could influence future change.
And so the housing action plan, one of the items that has to come out of it, so I can finally get the rest of the grant money for it. So we have to get a short-term rental ordinance in place, regulation ordinance. And that's on the 11/26 agenda because it got carried over from the last agenda. So it is coming. Those regulations are coming for public comment and discussion. So we're coming. That's coming on the Board of Trustees at the next meeting on Tuesday.
So when you're talking about infill, and I don't know if this is the right place for it, and it kind of ties back to infrastructure. There are lots, big lots. I mean, I've got 4 lots. People think I've got this huge yard and why don't I just build another house? But you've got to understand a lot of these properties have sewer lines going across them, from the backyard to the front yard. They've got water lines, they've got gas lines. What happens when people start building on top of those when they're doing infill? Do we have to be clear that, but then I'm getting a little specific. We have to be clear that we don't want to start getting conflicts to where people are building on top or setting ADUs on top of infrastructure.
So if it's their service line, they're going to have to relocate their service line. But our mains in town, certainly, I can't say that they all, most of them run within public easements. A good 98% of them.
Well, when they enter the property.
Well, that's a service line. And so.
Yeah, and they're not in easements anymore.
But that is something that's taken care of with a site plan during the building permit process and the application process. That's not something that would be discussed in a comprehensive plan. That's building code is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking infill, when you're talking about infill, it's an exciting word.
And I think that's a good question. Like, that's an appropriate question to have here. How would this direction influence something that you want to think about in the future? Right, that you're going to want to do something about, because you don't want it to give you a direction that you don't think is good for the town, right? That being said, you don't need to get into discussions of zoning like this. This is not the zoning document, but it will inform it. So, that's a good way to think about it.
So if we had a housing policy, number 10, that said, hypothetically, promote owner-occupied homes for like short-term rentals or something along those lines, then how would that influence your meeting on Tuesday?
I don't think the comprehensive plan is where you get that prescriptive. I don't think the town can, I don't know how the town
I mean,
does
even
private shopping.
even having that policy in, we're doing that anyway, right? So there's a cap on the number of licenses in the proposed ordinance. I know some don't agree with how many licenses, since we've done a survey. But there's also a predisposition for primary residences to get licenses for single family bedrooms. That's also included within that, for single family homes that are renting out just a single bedroom. That's also included within that cap. I know I have a neighbor that's how she relies on some income, is she has a short-term rental that she rents out one bedroom. It's a primary residence, and that, whoever rents it goes through a back door, separate entrance. So, we're doing that with this upcoming ordinance on the 26th.
So this sounds like a land use ordinance. Is it coming to the planning commission?
It doesn't need to.
What you can and can't do with your private property?
It doesn't need to. And so if I did send out an email with a response from the town attorney that explained that it's legislative and that goes before the Board of Trustees.
Well, people in this town do what they want anyway. So good luck renting out bedrooms.
I mean,
Can we move on to the next goal or?
I enforce a lot, and that's why I get yelled at, and I get spat at. So there you go.
Okay. So where are we at now? Support flexibility. We took that one, senior housing adjustment.
Yeah, so goal housing 3, commit to inclusivity by ensuring a diversity of housing options that meet the needs of residents, including those for seniors and residents with special needs. That's a pretty self-explanatory goal. Policy housing 10, or what could be policy housing 11, encourage new developments to accommodate a variety of housing sizes, household types, tenure types, densities, and prices. Policy housing 11, support the development of a range of housing options as may be appropriate in different parts of the community, including, but not limited to, small homes, accessory dwelling units, townhomes, live and work units, and limited small-scale apartments or condominiums. Policy housing 12, support strategies that help local residents maintain resident-occupied housing rather than housing occupied by second homeowners. Policy housing 13, expand the supply of housing that is accessible to seniors, people with disabilities, or persons with mobility limitations through the use of universal design and visitability principles in the construction of new housing and the rehabilitation of existing homes. Policy housing 14, the town shall discourage redevelopment and demolition practices that significantly reduce existing housing stock in older neighborhoods and that result in the displacement of very low, and moderate income residents or special needs households. Policy housing number 15. The town shall monitor all redevelopment and demolition activity to ensure that comparable relocation housing is available in accordance with federal regulations, regardless of whether federal monies are used in the activity, and the town shall ensure that all adopted and proposed regulations maintain and encourage diversity in housing types that will support adequate relocation housing as required. Policy housing 16. Expand housing options for the aging population to facilitate aging in place, such as ADUs and intergenerational households and housing products for downsizing households. Policy housing 17. Support a continuum of care for independent living to assisted living to transitional facilities.
So that's a lot of housing. New developments, okay.
So these goals are specifically about seniors and special needs.
No, so it's commit to inclusivity by ensuring a diversity of housing options that meet the needs of residents, including those for seniors and residents with special needs.
Yeah, it seems like long-term renters would be a good one to add to that.
Can you explain, I'll
Long-term
see,
renters are getting moved out of town because there's less and less inventory, less and less places for them to rent.
can I explain exactly why seniors and residents with special needs is included?
Sure.
That's a protected class. It's a federally protected class. That's why that's included. And I understand that, I mean, long-term renters are like, I get it. Housing prices are nuts and interest rates are even crazy.
And homes are just being taken and used as hotels. It's probably the main reason.
So policy 12, support strategies that help local residents maintain resident occupied housing rather than housing occupied by second homeowners. So aren't you kind of like being pretty specific there? And I mean, when Pete is concerned about short-term rentals, and then also it's kind of interesting because in 11 above it, live/work units, that's almost like having a spare bedroom that you rent out. That's your income right there. So that's almost a live-work unit, right?
No, that's I guess it could
It's almost like home
be.
business.
It could be, but it would be more like what former Mayor Mary Backren did, right? She has a home occupation license and she does a seamstress out of her house.
I think you should have a home occupation license if you want to rent out a bedroom short-term.
Well, that's essentially what a short-term rental license is accomplishing.
Well, that's not in the zoning code though, and live-work is in the zoning code.
If you read the ordinance, there's also
It's by special review.
there's special use review in R1 and E1 because R2 already allows for 2 homes on a property and R3 also allows for multiple housing. So, it does require special use review, which means any short-term rental in a residential neighborhood, like the majority of the housing in our town would have to go to the planning commission first.
Well, that means it needs to be a zoning ordinance. It has to be in land use if it goes to the planning commission.
That's right. It's a legislative action to add that into the existing code.
Okay, so you're bypassing the review process for changing and putting an amendment in chapter 16.
What review process? What do you mean?
But it says anything that goes into 16, it's in the preamble for chapter 16. It has to go through a public process.
It is a public process.
Well, I'd have
That's
to
what a
read
public
it.
hearing is about for the 26th.
Okay, I'd have to read it. I'm
Well,
sorry, I don't have it.
can we
So we're off
park
topic.
that conversation or?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're never gonna get out of here.
Right.
I mean, I just want
Okay.
to, I just want to state for the record that I emphatically disagree that it is, that I think that as you've seen my email, the lawyer didn't cite any evidence to support his claim, which is highly unusual for an attorney.
Okay,
But
let's move on.
so let's move on, otherwise we'll be here all day. But I would like to go back to the housing policy number 12.
Well,
Okay.
I want to kind of get at that because that almost sounds accusatory.
Let's.
So what I'm getting at is this is the actual email from the attorney. This came from the attorney
Okay, let's do it.
and I mean, he gives an answer.
All right, here dear Attorney Bachner, your dismissive 2-sentence response reflects problematic legal practice and warrants careful scrutiny. Let's compare our respective legal positions. My conclusion is firmly grounded in statutory language. CRS 3123-305 explicitly states no such regulations, restrictions, or boundaries shall be adopted, amended, or repealed until after public hearing at which the Planning Commission shall submit its recommendation. That's the statute. Ordinance 2024-05 plainly falls within this requirement as it adds new use classification, creates development standards, modifies permitted use, establishes new zoning definitions. Your position, in contrast, offers no statutory citation, no legal reasoning, no explanation for exemption, no procedural support. This approach raises several concerns. You assert a legal conclusion without providing any supporting analysis, essentially asking citizens to accept your bare assertions. 2, your claim of errant conclusions is itself conclusory and fails to address the specific statutory requirements. Your refusal to expend town resources on citizen inquiries about legal compliance contradicts your obligations as town attorney to ensure transparent governance. 4, the attempt to shield your legal reasoning from public scrutiny raises serious questions about town accountability. I would direct your attention to Colorado Rules of Professional Conduct 2.1 regarding the duty to exercise independent professional judgment and render candid advice. Unless you can articulate specific grounds for exempting these zoning changes from statutory review requirements, your position appears to prioritize administrative expedience over legal compliance. Respectfully, Pete McCarthy. I haven't heard one, I haven't heard, like, I've just heard, no, I don't agree. But I haven't, I'm citing specific statutes that say that this needs to go to the planning commission. And our esteemed attorney is giving me a, nah.
I mean, that's something you'd have to take up with him, but I would.
I'm taking it up with all of you.
I would encourage you to read 3123-305, which talks about changes. Such, and this is for zoning, this is part 3 for zoning, such regulations, restrictions, and boundaries may from time to time be amended, supplanted, supplemented, changed, modified, or repealed. That's by the Board of Trustees. It's not.
No one's arguing that the Board of Trustees have the right to pass laws.
Okay.
This is a common pattern. I state something, you rephrase it as a different question and answer that question. I understand, but
I'm not the one that answered that. That was the attorney. So
it's a common
it'll be
pattern.
something. I'm
It's a
sure
common
he's gonna.
pattern
I'm sure he's gonna reply.
between town staff.
Sure, he's gonna reply.
No, his email said that he would not be replying because of expending town resources. So that was the final answer.
Okay, so let's move on.
I would like to go back to policy, housing number 12.
Okay, what would you like to know?
So occupied by second homeowners. First of all, I would say that investment property, so most second homeowners, the economics of it is that they buy a second home to squat on it so that they can reap the benefits of the equity. That whether they're occupied by the second homeowners, a more inclusive terminology here would be an investment property.
Rather than housing occupied by second homeowners or investment properties?
No, rather than housing used as investment properties.
Would you consider somebody that owns a second house that they rent out on a long-term basis an investment property?
Yes.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Say that again, ask your question again.
So would you consider someone that rents out a home on a long-term basis, more than 30 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider that an investment property?
Yes.
You know, I think there's some stuff in this, there's some stuff in the statute about, like, even with the short-term rentals, I remember hearing it's not been litigated yet, but it's all called housing. It's all called residential, and I'm kind of wondering what the statutes say about rentals.
The point there is that really doesn't encapsulate short-term rentals.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
What would you suggest to change?
And I think it will be addressed in the ordinance.
In the ordinance, but
I don't believe so. I actually think the ordinance, I mean, if we were going to support strategies that help local residents maintain resident
Why don't you
occupied.
just cross out rather than housing occupied by second homeowners? Just say support strategies that help local residents maintain resident occupied housing, period.
Right, but you're saying that the housing ordinance does that.
No, I don't know
Or
if
sorry,
it
not the
does, but
housing,
it could.
the short-term.
Yeah, it could. I mean, this ordinance is still in draft.
Yeah.
So that would be the place to get to it, though, if you're concerned about short-term rentals and who owns them, as opposed to this plan. That's where the regulatory part comes in to actually have some teeth. Now, I don't know right now, but I don't think it's precluding. No, there is a 200 days occupancy.
So resident.
yes, so most, and so, but we're getting off on that.
Yeah, we
are. And 200 days was decided because, what is it, 180 something is considered primary if you're over that half for 365. 200 is more like this is your primary residence.
Pete, would you be happy with that if they just took out because the rather than housing occupied by second homeowners gets kind of specific and it eliminates So it leaves it a little bit more open that way.
Sure, my question is how, again, it's like, what are we doing here? So how does this inform? Like, here's a great example. We have a short-term rental ordinance. Let's say that this was in place. How would this inform the board? How would you look at this and look at the current short-term rental ordinance and use it to inform what should and should not be in there?
Are you asking me that question?
I'm asking.
Oh,
I'm asking the
Maybe
members of
you'd
the-
prioritize short-term rentals that don't take away from the housing stock, for instance, because the homeowner still lives in the house. So it's not eliminated.
No, I mean, I understand that. But that's in the current short-term rental ordinance, there isn't a preference given to owner occupied. Like given.
There's a cheaper fee too. There is. So that preference is built into the fee, right? So that primary residence is for renting out a single bedroom. It's $150 for a license. That counts towards the cap, as opposed to $500 for a second owned home.
But if we had, the reason to have 40 properties, right, is because we want the tourist dollars, right? Is that, no?
No, so the reason is because there are currently, so using the Granicus, we did a demo, I got a free demo.
Yes.
And I looked at Granicus, I'm not sure if you've looked at that
I
software.
have, yes.
Yeah. So I've used it before and it's really intuitive. It uses Google's Metacrawler, it picks up everything.
Yeah.
And then it takes that and also uses data from the state for who's paid for the lodging tax. And then it does all of that. It used to be weekly, I think it's done daily now. And in that, within our town limits, there were 38 active listings that had shown that they had gone off the market or come on within the last 2 months, which is a good indicator that that was something being used as a short-term rental. And so with that number, that 38 number, it makes it, the reason 40 was decided on is because those 2 extra licenses take into account single bedrooms. Sweetgrass would have to get 3 because they're not a home, they're individual rooms being rented out that don't have like the other amenities, like a kitchen and all that stuff. So they'd have to get 3 of those licenses to continue to operate. And so that's why that 40 was decided. Other communities have used a percentage basis based on your existing housing stock. And so if we have 765 houses, that's what was in the housing needs assessment, 765, 775, something like that. 5.2% is 40. So, and a lot of these other places go like 20% of housing stock, and that's way too many. I've got 2 short-term rentals right next to me. And I've already had one of those people send in an email that wants to have language stricken for a local person contact. I'm like, I would never recommend that because we had an issue with that same property. So, I mean,
Understood.
yeah.
I understand all that. My strong disagreement with the current short-term rental ordinance is that the idea here with Shay was that we were trying to find a balance. I'm assuming that balance is between the needs of the long-term renters and these people who are renting these out for that. So grandfathering in all of the existing short-term rentals, given the fact that the long-term renters have clearly been suffering for the last 10 years or more in this town, how is that a balance?
So, no, I want
Can we get back to this?
because I think we're getting somewhere, and maybe we talk about this offline.
But I do want to bring it back to the policy. So the reason why I'm asking about this, for this policy, is if we're supporting strategies that help local residents maintain resident occupied housing, let's just full stop there, okay? Then I would look at the short-term rental ordinance, and let's say that this existed right now. And I would say that really doesn't do it. A short-term rental ordinance that supports strategies to help local residents would prioritize those 40 licenses to people who want to rent out the resident occupied homes. Instead, we're actually prioritizing the majority of those STRs are not resident occupied homes. In fact, they're single family homes that were taken out of the housing market, away from what could have been resident occupied housing, and used as investment properties. So my question is like, if that exists, if we had this thing, then how would the current short-term rental ordinance really reflect that housing policy?
So could you amend the current ordinance? I know it's hard, once things are in
We'll
place,
talk
you
about
can't
that
amend it
26 too,
anymore.
but-
Yeah,
But
but
what we're trying to do, right, by what you're trying to say by reducing the number of licenses would be that the people that have already bought these houses, they're off the market, right? They are being used as short-term rentals currently. And what you're trying to do is, by reducing that number, is to force somebody to turn that property into a long-term rental, essentially, right? And
I'm
so,
not trying to, I'm trying to.
well, but
I'm
that's
trying
what
to
the
support
ordinance, that would be
housing
that would be the fallout from that ordinance. And it could be challenged and seen as a taking. And if it's seen as a taking for somebody that has bought that property because we had a lackadaisical policy on short-term rentals, it's terrible, right? I haven't allowed any since I've been here. As a matter of fact, I mean, you guys had a public hearing about one.
so if things are
And so-
legislative, is it a taking? And if it's quasi judicial where it goes through the planning commission, is it as much able to be challenged?
Special use review for those, so residential homes, right? So if you're operating on Third Street, residential neighborhood, you would have to go, that's R1, you have to go get a special use review, favorable special use review before you can even apply for one, before you actually get that license. You can actually apply for the license, encumber it, depending on the outcome of that special use review. If it's denied, it goes back.
So the neighbors get to have
A say, correct.
What I hear you saying is that if we, let's say that we did 20, right? You're saying that could be legally challenged?
I would,
So but in that
That's my concern.
same line of thinking, 40 homes were taken away from long-term renters. There is in our current ordinance something that says that you have to have 30 days,
it's a
anything.
definition, it's not.
It's a definite, you're right, but it was still, where's the balance if we're only concerned with the taking away from people's investment properties
Right.
versus how does it support strategies that help local residents maintain resident occupied housing?
So going back to like this policy should have been in place in 2014, right? Before Airbnb went to Austin, before it went to what is South by Southwest, when they really hit the ground running. And that's what Denver did, that's what Boulder did, that's what Fort Collins did. They had these restrictions in place 10 years ago.
I was in San Francisco.
When they were
passed
having
the things and people lost their short-term rentals, okay? So there is absolutely what you're saying.
Were there
we
lawsuits?
call this FUD in my industry.
Okay,
Fear,
we're
uncertainty,
getting a
doubt.
little off topic
When you
here.
don't have, when you don't have an actual thing, you just kind of inject this fear into the thing. We absolutely can, we could restrict all short-term rentals
Sure.
in this town if we wanted to.
Were there lawsuits against San Francisco?
I mean, we live in the United States of America.
I'm sure there
Can we have
were.
a 5-minute recess,
You need to
please?
go to the
Oh,
bathroom.
sorry.
Yes,
Okay, why don't you go to the bathroom? You have my permission.
thank you.
You can keep talking during the break.
I don't get, we seem to be selectively using the fear of lawsuits. I'm meaning you specifically, selectively using the fear of lawsuits to support the things that you want and not the things you don't want. So like,
Can you be more specific, please?
well, is there a lawsuit against the town right now
For what?
for the removal of the trustee?
There certainly is.
Okay. Did that prevent any of the actions that we did in August?
I didn't do any of those actions.
I didn't say you did. But did you warn against the lawsuit for them doing that? I mean,
The Board of Trustees was fully aware that it would be, as a matter of fact, it was threatened
right. So
during those meetings.
right, and they thought it important enough to do, even though there would be a lawsuit. So why is protecting and bringing back 40 households back to this community that would have existed 10 years ago had we done something? Why is that not worth a legal risk?
There's a financial risk
And
there.
you asked me about San Francisco.
Right.
All the lawsuits were dismissed.
So there's a financial risk there, right?
Yeah.
And that financial risk exists because somebody had bought a property
Yeah.
with an intent to turn it into investment property with a return on investment.
Okay.
And unlike what happened with former trustee Bruner,
Yeah.
there is a chance that that property could have the rights taken away from them by artificially reducing the number to 20. Because if we were to say, if I had conclusive evidence today that said there are only 20 short-term rentals operating within the town of Paonia, I'd be happy to push that through.
So if it wasn't for the fear of lawsuits, you would support 20.
I think you have to weigh what happened, what you win or lose, right? And if you think that you're gonna win, you go for it. I don't think we'd be successful with some of these properties, because they have been able to operate for a decade as a short-term rental. And if they didn't get the chance or the ability to get that license, I'd be really concerned that they would have a leg to stand on.
I mean, we're not treading new territory. So I can present to you
lot of things.
many the court cases here that have, and not one, I mean.
Between 2022 and 2024, within that 2-year period,
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I'd be interested to see.
I'll provide them.
And that might be something to help sway a decision for the board at their next meeting. And if I'll tell you what, if you get that in, if you can get that to me by Friday afternoon, it can include it in that.
The only thing I want to do is get rid of this.
It's not like that. Well, it'll
Because
always
we have-
show, but you need to get it so it's locked. Securities.
All right.
We are on the next section.
So do we want to go to goal 4?
Yes.
Okay. All right, goal 4, housing 4. Preserve views to the mountains, natural amenities, and scenic vistas from the public realm. Policy housing 18. Maintain scenic vistas from rights of way, public facilities, and public lands to open spaces, Jumbo Mountain, Mount Lambert, Lands at Peak, the core commercial district of downtown Paonia, as shown on the map entitled View Shed, Gateways, and Store Contents. Policy housing number 19. Ensure views designated on the map entitled View Shed, Gateways, and Historic Context are integrated into planning for the development. This may include dedication of land, setbacks, height restrictions, modified building orientations, or modified placement on lot. Think of this as in conjunction with infill development. You tear down a house and you want to build a 3-story house all the way up to that 30-foot. New houses around them have already been built that have a view, and now you want to obstruct that view. We were saying, hey, look, Planning Commission, in consideration of a special use review, or hey, ZBOA, in consideration of a variance, you would allow for a different orientation of that building on that property, that structure on that property, to maintain views for neighbors. As long, you might allow for an encroachment to some setbacks, things like that. We're saying we're allowing that as long as you can ensure that your neighbors continue to have their view unobstructed. This actually was a problem up in Lynn's neighborhood for new construction. So a new house was built and obstructed a view. I think it was a former trustee who ended up selling his house and buying the house next door. So.
Were there other I guess my question is, it's like, it's sort of around like show your work. Like, are there policies that got left off of here? Are there like that you could have considered as part of this?
I don't know what you mean.
We've got 2 policies here, right? Like when you sat and you looked at housing goal number 4. How did you pick these 2 as the housing policy?
Well, so the first one is really based on a map that was presented early on before it got incorporated into what is known as the future land use map. So there's this gateways map that shows what our gateways are and then what our scenic views are. And so one of the things I have to do is update that map to make it so it can be inserted into this element. But that's where that one came from. And then, let's see, these are just suggestions. So if we're ensuring that views are maintained for neighbors, You can include, like I said, those dedication of land setbacks, height restrictions, modified building orientation, modified placement on lot. That, I believe, was language that is already in use. I believe that was Ridgeway, something to do with view sheds.
And it's similar to what they put in one of their bullet points that.
For zoning?
Is that skyline?
Suzanne put in their zoning.
Zoning,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's that?
This
This is what I've been asking for all along.
We've been waiting to have this meeting.
You can't write all this.
Well, it's like, it
I mean,
wasn't
you gotta understand,
exactly.
you gotta understand.
So it wasn't exactly
So
like.
I know you said something about statutory duties. My statutory duties are running the town. And then it's also within our code of ordinances that's really is very prescriptive. Then you have a contract that I have to
There's
follow.
no statutory duty for town administrators.
To even,
It's only for city managers and they're supposed to be elected.
I understand that, but there was a conflating of that word statutory. In our code of ordinances, I have a very specific set of things I'm supposed to do. Believe it or not, attending planning commission meetings is not one of them. And so I'm here to do this, because we've been waiting to have this public meeting to go over these things. And so that's why we're.
That's not, I mean, that's not entirely.
Can we just move on to the next goal, please?
Yes.
Or talk about our policies here?
It's up to you guys.
Because we really have, this is good stuff to get through.
So,
and-
ensure views designated. I feel a little funny about like designated view sheds. I mean, do I get a view shed? I mean, it's like, we're all in the country here. I have a view, I'm kind of on the north slope and I just have a view of the
There are-
skyline there.
There are.
But I don't see Lamborn Mesa, so does that exclude me from like someone building and like, if you live in a bowl, like what's your view shed? You know, I feel it's like certain people are getting these view sheds and other people are gonna get screwed, so I kind of feel uncomfortable with.
I mean, if you don't have a view shed right now,
Well, what do you call?
why
a
would we
view
ensure
shed?
that view shed? Well, I mean, it's listed up above. It's, you've got Mount Lamborn, Jumbo Mountain,
Well, I
Lansing,
don't have
those are view
Mount
sheds.
Lamborn, I don't have Jumbo Mountain, but I do have the edge of Lamborn Mesa, that it's a skyline, that I don't wanna see houses up there because it's gonna like start. So it's like, but is that gonna be on the map? I think
You wouldn't be-
everybody who moves here is kind of expecting this.
It wouldn't be houses on Lamborn Mesa. It would be your neighbors building a 30-foot house.
No, they
Obstructing
don't,
your
they can
view.
be 30 foot because it's a steep hillside.
I know, and what we're saying
So it's
is,
like-
we'll modify that structure so that it maintains view sheds for the neighbors.
Okay,
That's what it's
I
saying.
mean, we actually had one go up at the head of Rio Grande there, and I actually get shading now in the winter time, and it's up on the irrigation ditch, basically.
Is it in town?
Yeah,
Hope to not do
it's
that
actually a
again.
VRBO.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
It's
yeah, it
called-
shouldn't have been built, but it
It's
was.
called Laura's Tower,
When was this built?
Oh.
when Ken Knight was here.
Wow, so,
It
bring
actually,
Steph in. There's
we
nothing I
got-
can do about
it got
that.
approved, he signed off on the roof before the second floor was
And
built.
here's the best part. If you had this in your comprehensive plan, you could have considered
We
maintaining that view
did.
shed.
We had steep slopes on there, but it was completely ignored, and the neighbor wrote a letter to him.
But steep
And
slope
he ignored it.
is for landslide and like,
Exactly.
this is different. This is maintaining your view
Well,
shed.
they didn't even use the rules that we had.
Well,
That's
And
why
they,
we don't
And
repeat that.
that's what we're trying.
well,
to-
this we can all,
But that's what we're trying to.
I know, but the thing is, you can have these rules, but it depends on who you
Of
hire.
course, but this is the framework and then we get the regulations and
We
then.
still have a framework where we haven't.
Okay.
okay.
I mean,
Goal
we have
housing number
to-
5, identify, recognize, and protect Paonia's unique and irreplaceable historic, and I should say cultural heritage. Policy housing 20, protect historic and cultural resources for the aesthetic, cultural, educational, environmental, and economic contribution they make to maintaining and constructing Paonia's identity and quality of life. Policy housing 21, acknowledge and support Paonia's artisan, artistic, and multicultural heritage, and community diversity in planning town facilities, programs, events, and resources. That was it for that goal. Any I mean, those were pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay. And you'll notice that in policy housing 21, I really start hammering in both our audit letters, our management discussion and analysis, our budgets, and within this comprehensive plan, this change that Paonia has done from a mining or mineral-centric community to trying to change our identity to this creative culture. And so you'll notice that those are going to be in a lot of policies because it has significantly changed our economy. It has significantly changed our economy. And it's not just anecdotal evidence, there's hard evidence coming from the Department of Revenue that says so.
Really?
And there is.
Specific to Paonia? or in
Specific to
general?
Paonia, absolutely.
Because the town has the ability to see everybody's taxes by company.
Yeah, and
That wasn't
that-
always the case.
Right, that spreadsheet is actually pretty intuitive, and I can drill it down to even special events and find out so we can compare who has been listed on a special event and if they've paid those sales taxes, and I can match them up. And those that do not pay sales tax, we actually have a provision that we can kind of go after that. So
So it's getting more sophisticated.
it is, the Department of Revenue has been updating how they track things.
It's not a gift economy anymore.
Correct. Goal housing number 6, preserve, protect, and stabilize the character and visibility of residential neighborhoods, particularly within areas with natural hazards such as floodplain and steep slope conditions, or require demolition when rehabilitation is not possible nor economically feasible, such as in areas where a significant concentration of substandard housing exists that contributes to negative neighborhood or environmental conditions.
So you said that had to do with FEMA areas, right?
It could be within, floodplain and hazard
Do we
areas.
have any buildings in FEMA areas?
We sure do.
And where are they?
So they're along Fifth Street, and they're also along
Price Road.
Price Road, but there's some in town limits by the library.
I thought the library said they were not in the flood.
They are not, but the houses right up on the bank.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but in general, I'd like to know where the substandard housing is. Is that gonna be on our map too? If it's outside of FEMA?
We don't,
I wanna see where the target is.
there are no targets. So this isn't something where we're gonna go, we're going after this one. But this is to say that if it's not economically feasible to rehabilitate a house, demolition would be
So
considered.
who gets to decide that? Is that the homeowner?
Well, no, that's actually building code, and a building official decides that based on code. It could even be a fire marshal who decides that something's uninhabitable because it doesn't meet fire code.
That's kind of scary to me. I mean,
It
I
already
think of my
exists.
neighbors and I think of what could go up if someone decided to take something down, and it's kind of threatening.
The rest of these goals should get at that though. Because there was a big thing about if a house is taken down, they can't just put something else up. It has to match what is needed in the neighborhood. That was one of the
What do you
goals.
mean, what is needed? I mean, it's
Well,
still
there's a
can
goal. We
change.
just went through the goal. There's
I mean-
one here already.
So I mean, single family, sure, whatever, but I mean, they could move it on the lot, they could
Well-
put it on your property line, so you
No.
get more southern exposure.
Well, but they shouldn't be able to because of all the setbacks that are
I
already.
guess we're just gonna see.
Well, and the goals here are to protect if somebody takes a house down first, they can't just. I mean, there's already five places where demolition is discussed and that the town can have some say in what's going back in place. That was one of the
The
policies.
town and say that the neighbors can't. have a
Well,
say.
no, I mean, there's still all the zoning setbacks and everything, Suzanne,
Well,
so.
Joe's house is a lot more than 5 feet.
Well,
I mean, if
but-
someone could just move it right onto the property line, and it would be a nightmare.
I don't think they could because.
Yeah, they
if
could,
it's a
as
new-
long as it follows the zoning regulations.
Well, I'm
How could they, the only zero lot line we have is.
No, 6 feet. When things are uphill from you, 6 feet is very close, is what I'm saying. So I just like,
You're
it
going
scares me.
to, oh,
And when I think of tear downs and redevelopment, I think of Cherry Creek, I think of the Observatory Park. And what I saw down there was so sad, what people, developers, when they get their hands on things.
well, I think that's why there's
So,
some
but
sections in here. to
There's also an
prevent
international
that.
building code that we've adopted that talks about steep slope and how high up you can go on a slope.
Yeah,
what
I
you can
don't
do.
know how steep this slope is. That's interesting. That'd be really interesting to put that on the map. what the slopes are.
It
We
is
do
on
a
the future,
topo
it is
thing.
on the future land use map, and I believe that is a map that we have to provide, right? In the comments, I think it was steep slope and floodplain. I think
Yeah,
those are
but
the
steep slope,
high hazard
what do they
areas.
say, it's like 30%? What is it in our code, 40%?
Which we would have to do high hazard areas, and that's a map that's coming, but you're not gonna pick out individual properties. So that's,
Yeah, I know, but that's why it's like,
Okay.
it's a little threatening sounding, because we've never talked about blight before in this town. And there's a lot of old coal miner shacks around here. And it's because people
my house is
can't,
2 of them put together and then stuccoed over.
I know, but it's because people can't afford anything else. And so when you start requiring tear downs and new energy efficiency standards, it becomes really expensive.
It's not requiring, it's encouraging,
Okay.
right? We're encouraging.
And the other thing I wanted to add is there's a really nice
With the
table
building
in
inspector and the
in
fire
the,
marshal.
in the housing needs
Yeah.
assessment. There's a table of all the places that people get assistance. So, and a neighbor across the street just took her 2 years, but she got a new furnace, she got new windows through this program. That's one of the ones on
Yeah,
this
so
list.
this is an example that maybe what we could ask for in Delta County is our county commissioners got rid of the housing rehab grant and the housing rehab, low interest loan program.
Chafa picked it up.
5 years ago, they got rid of it.
So Chafa picked it up. I have information up there. So
Chapa,
Colorado Housing Finance Authority. So they came and gave us a bunch of materials. Please pick one up. They got a bunch of rehabilitation, low interest loans or grants that they're willing to give
are
to
they
anybody
operating
in
out of
town.
Delta County now or somewhere else?
They sure are. So their office out in Montrose, but she's come to visit with me, and she's also very close to Dana with.
Delta Housing Authority, they used to come to the town once a year and they do a presentation and people could know what was out there. They make a presentation at the meeting.
Delta Housing Authority doesn't really do much here anymore.
Yeah, they used to be a lot more active.
Yeah, but Chafa is with.
And we would donate to them. The town would,
Yeah.
like, cough up $100 or something.
I don't have that budgeted, I don't think.
Can we start, can we go?
Yes.
Move on.
Policy Housing 22, commercial uses that are adjacent to residential districts may expand if the expansion will not have an adverse impact on the character or viability of the surrounding neighborhood, or if the expansion will substantially increase non-residential traffic in the surrounding neighborhood. Policy Housing 23, support and encourage individual homeowners and developers to increase reinvestment that improves resilience, stormwater management, and water conservation type improvements to landscape and or structures on private property, as well as enhancing the design, structural quality, and aesthetic conditions of existing housing and the neighborhoods through the pursuit of building form standards and upcoming updates to the town's land development code, which ensure that new development and redevelopment preserve the existing community character. Policy Housing 24, support efforts of community-based organizations and neighborhood improvement initiatives which contribute to the stabilization, conservation, enhancement, and improvement of the existing housing, structures, and other physical facilities within neighborhoods. Policy Housing 25, the town will create programs and or incorporate tools within its land development code to reduce substandard housing that will also help to identify specific structures and or general areas for rehabilitation, redevelopment, and if appropriate, demolition.
I mean, my one comment on policy housing 23 is are we now getting into the too prescriptive zone and maybe, I don't know, I'm not a.
Yeah.
I-
So,
I'm not an expert here, so.
so I don't think so. What this is really saying is like, we're going to promote people to start that want to, we're going to encourage homeowners to make their houses more resilient to climate change, more resilient to, what we see in the springtime
Yep.
with deluges of water and then also promote like energy efficiency, right? So we're also going to promote like using less water. Xeriscape could be something that's considered for homes. We have a couple of homes in town that when they do, or a couple of properties in town that are residential, not commercial, that when they use water to irrigate, it's like hundreds of thousands of gallons a month. We're paying for it, but how do we want to promote something to reduce that for water conservation, things like that.
I have a question, it's not in here, but when you think of that slope along there, Rio Grande, for instance, you know, the water problem in Rio Grande? That comes down, wets the whole street there on, to the south of Second Street. Remember that?
Uh-huh.
They've been looking for, that started when that hillside started being developed, because people start building things and they divert the groundwater and they just dump it on, because there's no infrastructure there to put this, there's springs along that hillside. So, I mean, again, we have to be cognizant of things, conditions that are in place that can impact surrounding homes, the town property, the roadway, and the main roads.
And that's kind of what policy 43 is saying is you're promoting reinvestment to improve resilience and stormwater management.
It's not stormwater though, it's spring water.
Oh, that's a whole other nightmare. When you're talking
It is a
ditch,
nightmare.
when you're
No,
talking
it's-
ditch companies, they
No, it's
think,
not ditch companies, this is year round. There's a spring that comes down. that
oh, so
I
it's
have
not
to
an
go in.
irrigation ditch, it's.
It's not, yeah, it's spring. There's a year-round spring that my neighbor, it was dumping onto Delta Street, and I eventually took it and I piped it all and I put it back into the town storm sewer,
So
through my
so-
yard, and it wasn't, it's just, that's what people have had to do around here. You just have to like try to solve these problems.
I didn't know anything about it, but if there's
Yeah.
a spring, we'd have to look at water rights, who actually has water rights for that spring. If nobody does, then the town will put in for it, and I'll find a way to pipe it to our water plant, so
Well, we've had it tested, it's really hard.
it's garbage.
Field plants. But I think that's another problem that we saw up there with that steep slope development. There is actually year-round springs on there. I mean, certainly irrigation on top of the mesas adds to it, but there are actually year-round springs that I don't think we're cognizant of. And so when we talk about developing these areas, we can also create problems because we don't have enough information about things. And we can't create policies if we don't have the information in place either.
We currently require, like for certain development, we require not only with your site plan, but how you're gonna manage your stormwater. And so, let's just talk, let's say it's just,
Groundwater,
let's just talk about it, that it's groundwater. Let's say it is this-
groundwater and stormwater.
Right.
Maybe we want to add groundwater as a word.
In ground, sure, that's something that you can add.
But when you get a permit, you have to do a study of the water table,
Correct.
and then you have to mitigate.
I've
any
never heard
problem.
that.
Well,
What
I
kind of
haven't
permit?
either.
I mean, Paradise,
Well,
we're
it's because Dan Reardon was here. He's not hearing.
not
me.
Paradise, we
It's
say.
one of the, it's in the building code. You have to do that.
A site plan.
You have to have a, you know.
But what if you're unaware of it until you cut down the trees and start digging a hole and all of a sudden it's like the trees aren't there to suck it up anymore and
It isn't, it's about the water table.
that's what
You wanna
happens.
So
add
how-
groundwater
how-
into the,
Your
You can add
house is-
groundwater,
I
sure.
see you're on kind of more of a flat
Hey,
area.
you're keeping that.
Okay, so we'll just add groundwater. That's sufficiently vague, but it's mentioned, right?
Yeah, it's just something to be cognizant of. It's great.
Stormwater and groundwater management. That's a start. Okay,
Okay, goal housing 7. Encourage building and construction strategies, methods, and practices that promote energy efficiency through low-impact design principles, including the use of renewable energy resources in the construction of new homes and the rehabilitation of existing homes. Policy Housing 27. Encourage individual homeowners and private developers to use currently acceptable green housing specifications as made available from U.S. Green Building Council for the rehabilitation of existing housing structures and construction of new homes. Policy Housing 28. Promote and enforce sufficient design and construction standards as these become adopted as part of the International Building Code. The town shall also promote commercial and residential standards such as passive houses that are promulgated from time to time by the Colorado Green Building Guild.
so when you say encourage, these aren't requirements.
Correct.
And can the board turn them into a requirement?
Say that again.
So you said the board can turn to encourage individuals they can start requiring things in their laws.
Well, they would have to write an ordinance that says this is required. I would caution them that if it's not in the International Building Code as a requirement, not to make it a requirement.
And there's some things that it's awfully hard for old homes to conform.
Mhm.
Even the International Building Code is actually not all that great for old homes. But, in my opinion.
So this could be something like, you know, what is it, that double pane gas windows, replacing your windows in your home. It could be getting a heat pump system for your HVAC, all of which receive state and federal tax credits. So those are all things that can be done with that.
So this is something, I was walking in the snowy morning the other day, 5 o'clock in the morning, along First Avenue there. And it was that new modular home that got put in there. And there was this, it sounded like a car running, just kind of idling. And I was like, what? It's like, it's their heat pump. So the more like density you get, the more conflicts you're gonna be getting between homeowners, because all of a sudden they're like noises and things that you never knew were gonna exist with these new homes. And I'm really concerned about that we're, not addressing, and I'm sure that the hum was silent enough to not violate the Colorado noise rules, but it would be enough to drive a neighbor crazy if you couldn't step out your back door without hearing that constant hum. So what do we do about things like that?
Well, we do have a noise ordinance, so
It's not loud enough to violate the noise ordinance.
I've got a meter.
That would be interesting just to see,
So-
but I doubt it would be loud enough.
But so I do want to say, if you do see something that you think is maybe a violation, you can report it through Text My Gov anonymously, and let me go look at it.
That's
So-
good to know. I don't think it's a violation though, but it's something that could be a real annoyance, and it comes with increasing density when you're packing people together. And this obviously wasn't density in this area, but I was like, God, how would you like to live next door to that?
So there's some things that you guys could require in like some of these policies where you could say appropriate screening, through bushes or something to help with reduced noise levels. Consider noise levels, something like that. You could put that into one of these policies easily.
Which goal do you think that would go under?
Maybe with energy efficiency, since these heat pumps are all part of that.
Well, I'm just preserve, protect, and stabilize the character and visibility of residential neighborhoods, particularly this is housing goal 6.
So
Areas of metro has, I just wonder,
density doesn't impinge
stabilizing
on
the
the,
character.
it doesn't impinge on the, you want density.
I'm just
but
wondering if you could
don't
add
want
in
the
something auditory.
auditory nuisances. That's why people want to get away from the cities a lot of times, is they get tired of these conflicts and living so close to people, and I'm afraid that we're gonna bring it here.
Just looking if there's.
Maybe it does go under housing 7 as like policy 29 or 30.
Where are we, the very end?
Yeah, and maybe that's ensure that all efficient design and construct. I don't know how you would word that.
Where are you reading from?
I'm thinking out loud.
Oh, but are you thinking of a new policy?
Yeah, under housing 7.
Mhm.
It's some sort of an encroachment in a way.
Ensure that all energy efficient designs and construction contemplate both light trespass and noise trespass, or something to that effect.
Okay, that's good, just acknowledging.
Because
that.
then you're also covering dark skies.
Yeah. Okay.
So having gone through this, what we did with our last elements is that we opened up a period of time to accept public comments and feedback. What we recently did with the short-term rental ordinance is we put out a survey. We didn't do a survey with the other elements, but I think that because this one has been so controversial, maybe it is wise to get a survey so we actually have feedback. My only concern that I have is that We want to hear from people in town and not folks that live out of town. I guess those people out of town, we want to hear from too, because we do have a growth management area, right? But, you know, I think it would be up to you guys to decide what you would weight higher. Would you weight an opinion from in town higher than out of town or not? So
Are you suggesting a Survey Monkey specifically?
we bought SurveyMonkey for a year, so we're gonna have lots of surveys, folks.
I mean, if I can just, I did not think that was a very good survey that you put out today. Or yesterday.
Oh, no,
No, because it was biased in the actual questions. You're like explaining your reasoning and then asking a question. And you're basically editorializing in your question and then asking a question, which is not how you do surveys. Which
this is
not
an
how you-
academic survey, and I understand, but I want to tell you one thing. So what was going on with what was going all over social media was completely incorrect. And I don't know, it was all opinion and not fact-based. And so what that survey did, it provided a link. It's fixed. I know the link wasn't working, but it provided a link that goes to the actual short-term rental ordinance. And then it also talks about what the meat that is in that ordinance.
Yeah.
For those questions.
Did you notice that in the email that you included from Shay, that it said that you would bring, Shay said, it said that ordinance would be brought to the planning commission?
I'm well aware of what Shay recommended.
Okay,
Sure.
yeah, it was from Shay, yes, but it was what she recommended. And it was what you said you did say to us in a meeting, you were gonna bring it back to us. So, For
I may have.
For the record.
So, this survey, do you have a printed copy available for people too?
No, we don't have a printed copy.
Because I know people, like neighbors of mine who don't do computer. And
Have them come see us and we'll get them set up with something. They can set it right there and take that survey very easily.
I don't know how motivated they are.
We can have it here.
Well, they just not.
That they can-
I guess we could, yeah. And then what I do is have probably one of our staff members then add those responses into the survey because it's going to give us analytics.
So we could have a printed one and then
We
someone can add it to it.
Would you be willing to share that with the planning commission in writing?
Well, I
So
think
can-
we should
The
have,
analytics.
No, before you send out the survey.
I think we should be able to approve it.
Well, you mean for the short-term rental, or I'm sorry,
For this survey,
Um,
the
Sure.
conference.
absolutely.
Okay. I'm not asking that we approve it, I'm just asking that we work together to get to
I mean,
the
this,
question.
absolutely, this process is going on for a decade, trying to get a comprehensive plan passed.
And yet we still released it without a housing element in June, so it's like, there's a reason why it's taking a long time, because there's been a lot of problems to get here.
It's been about
So,
8 years, maybe 7 years.
yeah,
I value that opinion.
We didn't contemplate a comprehensive plan.
There were some drafts.
Not in 2014, there was
I
that.
just remember Tammy was gonna try to write part of it.
That was in 2018 or
Right.
2019.
okay, well,
Okay, so,
thank you for going over those, that is a lot to go, I mean, I may have feedback, additional feedback, but I appreciate going through all this.
yeah, thanks. I thought it was a meeting in itself. I mean, so it was good to be able to reserve one meeting for this. Okay, so any more questions?
I know you can't make decisions, but is there a period of time that you would want to accept comments? We're coming up on holidays too, so I think it should be
Yeah.
a little extended.
Takes a little longer.
Did we have a date for a public hearing on this whole, on everything?
Yeah, what happened with
Yeah.
the
We don't
board?
do that.
Has the board been asked?
No, I forgot, it's on Tuesday's agenda.
Okay.
And there's a little less than $500 left for Shay.
But
For not
Calrose.
I mean, not Shay, for Gallows, so
Tuesday's agenda is on 10th of December, right?
She gave a December date.
No, we said to be determined in January. Because we decided there's no way to get all this together in the advertising and have people come in
Oh,
December.
okay.
So that was. to
Oh, I
be
mean, your
determined in
meeting
January.
is where you're gonna decide if you want to spend the money.
No, this is Tuesday,
Yeah, what, Tuesday?
to this Tuesday,
This Tuesday?
26th.
26th, okay. For some
This-
reason, I
this-
was looking at the calendar.
Is asking the trustees to release the $393 left in the Tower Rose for her to help advertise when the full draft is ready for everyone to see. And to get it out to people so that they can come to, and it wouldn't be the hearing, it'll just be a meeting for people to weigh in.
On the 26th,
Yeah.
the second Tuesday, yeah. Okay.
I will attempt to go through, get the transcripts and put the sort of details for each of whatever the housing policies are here. Share them with you, to make sure that, you know, it's not, is it out of character, or that we agree with it, so that we kind of have something to look at, because I think that the people who aren't here, that will be useful for them to also look at.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you.
And you will get comments before Friday for the short-term rental ordinance, but
I will.
thank you. So I can include them in the packet. I really don't want to work the weekend again.
Okay. Great, so, I guess. we can-
So now comments, you were looking for.
Oh, yeah,
to
you're
ask
wanting
people,
So-
so how do you want to ask for comments?
So now that this has been open, right, and we've had this public discussion on this element, maybe we start accepting them until, so let me look at the calendar. We did 2 weeks for the other elements, but we're coming up on holidays. I don't think that's enough time.
So what do you have in mind for, the meeting? Does anybody have preferences for the regular meeting, coming up here?
Can I finish this?
I was kind of wondering if
Yeah.
it would roll into
So
it.
maybe we accept comments to December 31st. And then at your December 2nd meeting, I should have a survey language ready for you to look over. So that you can decide on final language. That survey can go out on December 3rd or 4th. Then you have all that time to gather feedback. Does that sound okay?
So do you want to talk about the survey at the next meeting?
That's what I'm saying, and I'm
December 2nd.
suggesting that, is I'll
Yeah.
have survey language for you to go over and tweak. I will not attend that meeting.
Okay.
But I will endeavor to have whatever your final things are after that second meeting, to have it into a survey and published the week of the second. So I have to take time off, or I will lose it.
And the second's the first Monday, the normal schedule.
Okay, so we can like look it over, and and the second, is it the first Monday?
Mhm.
Yeah, the second. Yeah, December 2nd, survey language. 6. Yeah. You want to just keep it to that? And
Because you've already approved all, like, you've already said okay to the other elements.
well, we
right?
haven't really talked about future land use map or anything, future land use map, but that's,
Put it on.
I got more maps that you guys have to look at too, so.
You would have those by the second?
yeah.
So potentially,
I'd rather you just like look at survey and
okay.
Yeah,
if I have it, yay,
it's
if
too
not-
much to look at too many things, it just, takes long enough. Isn't it? Okay. That sounds good. Okay, great, so the survey language, next meeting will be the topic. Let's say anybody has any other ideas. Great.
So I know there weren't motions made for this, but there were some minor edits to the policies. Are you all good with those minor edits being put in? Before the survey goes out?
Oh, yeah, can we just see the minor?
We're gonna
can
see
we
them at
the
the
new
December 2nd.
edited, we can see the new edit
Right,
I mean,
but
yes, in
what I'm
general,
saying
yes.
is we can't do a motion tonight, but can we go ahead and put that into the draft so everybody can see it?
For the second.
Yeah.
then we can agree to it.
I
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay,
Are we done?
Yeah,
Do we hit the gavel?
no, it's a work session.
I'm in it anyway.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
thanks.